It's across the street from me.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to call the committee of the whole meeting to order. It's Tuesday, August 14th at 7 p.m. First item on the agenda is roll call, please.
Rosato?
Here.
Atak? Stark? Here. Chansett? Wolf?
Here.
Salvati?
Here.
Brown?
Here.
O'Brien?
Here.
Callahan?
Here.
Meitzler?
Here.
Malay? Ewer?
Here.
Cerrone? And McFadden.
Okay, so we do have a quorum to conduct the meeting. Next item is item 2, which is the approval of the minutes for the July 10th, July 17th, and the August 7th, 2018 Committee of the Whole meetings. Anybody have any comments or questions on those minutes? Can I get a motion to recommend the City Council?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Metzler, second by Ewer. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Let the record reflect. Alderman Cerrone just entered the meeting. Next, we have item number 3, which is items removed, added, or changed. I just want to make one mention that the printed copy has got a few errors on it, so we will be going by the online copy. They're both very similar. It's just the way there was some mistakes in the numbering and the placing of the items. Everything is still the same that's on the agenda, just the way it was typed up, not caught. Anything else, Laura?
No, that's it.
Okay. I will make mention also, if the meeting is running long, item number 17, which is the presentation, we may postpone until next Tuesday's meeting. Okay. Item 4, matters from the public for items that are not on the agenda. If anybody has anything for us for an item that is not on the agenda. Okay, Yvonne, please come up and give us your name.
Yvonne Dinwiddie, 1156 Pine Street in Batavia. We got an email from the Board of Elections yesterday. We filed our petitions last Monday. They were signed for here at the city, and they want to know where are our petitions. They should have been filed. There was no objection. You had 5 days for the objection. Don't you care that the people want the opportunity to vote on a matter? The fact of the matter is that we talked to over 12, 13, 1,400 people. Some of those people will vote for keeping home rule. Others may vote not keeping home rule. But you're not even giving them a chance when you don't file the petition. And when we have a council person like Susan Stark who says it makes her blood boil when people want to take part in their government, I don't think that that's right.
Yvonne, that's not what I said, so please don't misquote me. It does make my blood boil to think about taking away home rule, is what I said.
Well, when you say that, it makes your blood boil.
It does.
You don't care what the people want. And
That's not what I said.
If we were doing what the people wanted to begin with, we would have no reason to take away home rule. You got home rule in 2009. We didn't even think about taking it away until just the last 4 or 5 years. We threatened.
Regularly.
We literally threatened to get it on the ballot to remove home rule because the council, in our opinion and in the opinion of many of the citizens of Batavia, the council was not listening to the people. A lot of people are very, very angry about a lot of things. The electric company, number 1, One North Washington, number 2, flooding, number 3, streets, number 4. I could go on and on. And there are people who are leaving Batavia. We've lost so many businesses, and we're paying a lot of money to Chris Aston and other people to bring business into this town, and you didn't even have a clawback for a very long time. So, you know, we want those petitions filed with the county.
Okay,
That's your duty.
to answer your question, Laura's got a response.
Yes, so the statute provides that that the Board of Elections for the City of Batavia must file that within 45 days. And in fact, the first 5 days are the period within, if someone were wanting to object to the petition, that they could do so. And so there has been no deadline that has been missed by the City of Batavia with regard to the petition. And the petition was filed on the very last day that it could have been filed as well. So we will definitely meet the obligations provided by the statute and file that in plenty of time for it to appear on the November 6th ballot. There's no games being played here.
Well, I question that, and I will have some comments about your proposed referendum question when that time comes up, but that's on the ballot, so.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Carl?
Working in the yard all day. I usually always try to say something good to start with, and then the other shoe falls, as the school board always says. But anyway, the concert 2 weeks ago tomorrow was outstanding. I mean, that group was outstanding. I made comments to a few people. You'd have to pay big money to go to a concert that was that good. So whoever put that together, bravo for them. The other thing is an acronym. I doubt any of you have ever heard of it. It's called DAEO. I didn't think you would. It's called the Designated Agency Ethics Officer. Every federal agency has at least one of those. And I served in that role for the central region, about 22 states, as chief of that area because we're not headquarters, so we had to have a DAEO, and that was me. So where I'm heading with this is probably the term electioneering, and maybe Laura has briefed everyone, but from my understanding, no city employee, none of the elected officials can publicly stand up and advocate for either side of this home rule question. So I just wanted to make that clear, even the mayor. I hope I don't hear, this is why we must keep home rule. That's electioneering. And for a few of the statements at the meeting last week, I've had county feedback that some of those were electioneering and some were marginally electioneering. So I hope I don't hear any of those tonight, and I'm just getting that on the record early. Thank you.
Carl, what, DADO, what does the second T stand for?
Oh, Designated Agency Ethics Officer,
Oh.
DAEO. DAEO. And I guess I could add that's what happened to the FBI agent. He engaged, one of the terms of art of DAEO is prohibited practices. Of course, electioneering is a prohibited practice. Making statements about a president of any party and advocating political sides to any issue by a government employee is a prohibited practice. And as we found out with the FBI agent, it depends on a lot of circumstances, but in his case, it was enough to be a fireable offense. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, then we're going to move on with the agenda, and the next item is the item number 5, the wastewater treatment plant monthly update.
Jerry, take it away.
Thank you. Let me just get set up here. Okay, monthly update for month of July at the wastewater treatment plant. We've been moving forward inside the main building. I'll have some photos outside and inside just to show you some of the progress that we've made. MEPs are ongoing inside, including electrical, HVAC, plumbing, and process piping, as well as a sprinkler system. The exterior masonry is ongoing. Got approximately a third to a half of the face brick done on the outside, which is going to end up being a lot. It's a 30-plus tall building, so all the way around is quite a bit of brick. We've also started interior painting of the walls and piping. In the chlorine building, we've completed installation of the flood protection. We put stop logs on the outside of all of the entrances, which is basically just a frame with steel logs that we place in there in case of a flood. that will protect the building in a 500-year storm, or a 500-year flood, I mean. The digester operations building shoring removal is ongoing. We're about 95%. I think there's just one that's remaining to be taken down. So that is almost complete, and process piping in and around that building is ongoing. The digester covers have continued to be assembled and surface prepared and painted. As far as the site goes, some large diameter piping was installed in the last month, including a large section of 36-inch diameter ductile iron pipe into the digester operations building, a duct bank down through the middle of the site to connect power from the main building to the digester operations building, and gas service, sidewalk, and some other site improvements, retaining walls, minor things like that. But Alderman O'Brien is right. We have quite a few people down at the site over the last month, and I anticipate that's going to continue throughout the rest of the project.
Any questions, comments for Jerry?
When's the lid going to be down on the digester?
Well, lid should be done next month, but that doesn't mean that the odors will cease. So just to make sure, to remind everybody, the digestion is the key there. Right now, substantial completion is for October, mid-October, I believe, for the project as a whole. So that means that the contractor needs to have the digesters up and running by then, at the very least. So if they don't, of course, there's a penalty. We've discussed this before. It's $2,000 a day, every day, calendar day, until he reaches substantial. So that date is fast approaching. His electrical switchgear appears to be arriving around that time for that building. So we'll just have to keep a close eye on it, and I'll keep you up to date with what effect that will have. Until that day, we'll of course continue the odor abatement that we've been using, which has helped. I know it hasn't prevented, but it has certainly helped.
Anybody else? Jerry, I got a question. And, the switchgear you say is not coming till the beginning of October?
That's when it's slated for delivery, yes.
And so the installation and all the terminations to that could possibly take a couple of weeks.
Oh, yes. Yes, it will take a while. They'll have all their conduit run by then. They'll have everything stubbed up and ready so that they can just bring in the box and plant it where it needs to go. As far as terminating wires, after that there's a startup period for all pieces of equipment. So I assume there's going to be between 3 and 4 startups per week until we can get the whole system up and running. And when we can, we will stop feeding raw sludge to the sludge handling building and stop the odor control and start digestion once more.
So it sounds like we're not going to make the schedule.
It certainly does, yes. Right now he's still projecting 30 days behind. So 30 days behind would mean that he is moving into November for that date.
Okay. And there's no improvement on that either.
No, there isn't, despite the quantity of people that have been working.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, just keeping it clear for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to say I failed to introduce Jerry Ruth from Trotta Engineering,
Thank you.
just for the record. Thanks, Jerry.
Oh, sorry. Any more questions? Nope. As far as Costco, we spent just over $19 million so far with engineering and money to the contractor. Pay requests have been being reimbursed on a regular rate from the EPA, so the city's been made whole fairly quickly. And according to the contractor's last schedule, which will, again, it'll be updated in about 3 days, we are at 76%, so that is as of July 15th. As far as approved change orders, I don't have any more change orders for you today. We did end up getting final pricing for the slide gate replacement, which was, I believe, $36,000, down from initially $66,000 on their initial estimate. So that will be on the next change order. As far as the schedule update, this is the same thing that you saw last month, 30 days circled in red, no change. staggering in presentations just made it so that I had that on this presentation last month as well. So this is the same set of activities, a lot of red, which means a lot of critical path, if you know how these Gantt charts work. A lot of backloaded activities, so there even more reason that there's going to be as many, if not more, staff on site working in the various locations. All right, for the main building, this is in June. I know it's a few months ago, or a couple months ago, but just to get a feel of how far we've come. Roof's completely done. Half of the north wall has been enclosed with masonry. This is the back of the building on the south side. Right after that deck, that elevated deck outside was poured. Since then, in July, we did half the roof. Or in July, we did the rest of the roof, and we have the south side of that left portion of the building, which is the maintenance garage, completely enclosed. What you don't see is the west side as well as enclosed with exterior face brick. So we've made quite a bit of progress inside, or as well. This is on the second floor where they're continuing with MEPs and the plenum above the ceiling. A lot of potable, non-potable, hot, cold water, sprinkler piping you see here, fire alarm, conduit. This is in the truck loading bay, which will get more and more busy as we actually start to get equipment installed. These are the two bays that will be used for loading and hauling off the sludge from the facility. The digestion complex in June. July, we got the elevated deck poured. And just last Friday, you can see a little bit that they're starting to build the block wall of the structure that will house all of the sludge heating equipment. The covers are, I believe the east cover is at the 95% level. They have everything tested and painted. The west cover is not quite there. I believe I'd give it 75% at this point. Still has stage 3 paint to be done. So you can see this is black and this is brown. Next month, they should both be black. And hopefully we don't have to talk about the covers anymore because they'll be done and they'll just be a part of the past. Here's another look at the digester operations building from the perspective of on top of the digesters. This is the stairs going down into the basement and the block wall being erected on the south side of that building. Just for perspective, this is some of the pipe that was done this month. It takes about 4 guys 4 hours to 8 hours just to install this manifold of 36-inch pipe. So it takes a while, and there's a lot of prep work that goes into it. So it's a lot of careful measurements to make sure it's done correctly. And here's a look at our beloved cover. So that is the update for the month of July. If you have any questions, I'll open the floor.
Anybody, any observations or questions? Susan?
Why is it that the system we put in place to help mitigate the smell, I mean, would it be a lot worse if we weren't doing what we're doing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just,
It's better than it was.
yeah, I was surprised, quite honestly. I was out on a particularly hot day and the wind was blowing in the right direction, and I was very surprised.
So there was, let's see, whenever they haul the dumpster away is when you're going to get the highest smell.
Oh.
So usually that happens at a regular period, but they have pickups, I believe, like 6 days a week. So at that time, they're bringing the dumpster out from underneath its cover. They're hauling it down, not through downtown, but they have to get out of the plant somehow. And so at those times, it is worse. Now, when we get into a dry period like we've been, there's also issues with the combined sewer and smell getting back up, and there's the headworks, and there's other areas that cause odors, but really, it's more noticeable because of the work that we've been doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jerry, I want to say one last thing is I commend Charter. 1% of the project is change orders, and generally it's a little higher than that. So I guess you guys did quite a job kind of seeing what was coming at you and your design work, so thank you for that.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
That should do it. Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry. Item 6, initial land use proposal review for the Windmill Commons. Grandview Capital is the applicant. Alderman Stark.
Got it. So Kenneth Bernhard of Seaburn Homes submitted an application for initial land use proposal to consider use of property located at 915 to 927 Main Street for a 10-unit townhome development of 2 buildings. The proposed development site is approximately 1.4 acres. And the ILUP process allows for the committee to discuss proposed new uses of land that differ from what is prescribed for property at the comprehensive plan or zoning, official zoning map, and to give the general public an opportunity to participate in the council's review. The goal of the process is to discuss issues regarding the proposed change in use and provide general commentary on the proposal. So the majority of this project is unincorporated. The north portion is in the city limits and is zoned R1L, single-family residential, low density. The city's comprehensive planned use map identifies a property for residential greater than 2 to 3.5 dwelling units per acre. The gross density of the proposed plan is approximately 6.7 units per acre, which would require a reclassification. The parcels are presently used as 2 single-family residences. So the applicant proposes 2 5-unit townhome buildings. Each would have rear-loaded 2-car garages accessed from one central driveway at Main Street. Open space detention would be provided along the rear of the property. Individual units would be staggered along the front facade, which each having a porch at the entry. Staff has reviewed this. It believes it to be reasonable for the applicant to consider similar density to the proposed development would require an amendment to the comprehensive planned use map, annexation, zoning map amendment, and design review. The proposed land use amendment would increase the density range for the subject property from 2 to 3.5 to 5 to 8. This designation is present to the west of the subject property and to the northeast. Additionally, property to the east at Main Street Townhomes is designated 8 to 15 units per acre. Staff believes it's reasonable for the applicant to consider similar density. That's what I skipped. The applicant should consider providing screening fences and additional landscape to provide sufficient buffering for the proposed residential units to the north and the west. So through this, the staff recommends the COW conduct the ILUP as prescribed in the zoning code, which allows as following, allows up for 10 minutes for the applicant to make a presentation, after which COW may ask questions of the applicant, provide up to 10 minutes for staff to add relevant information, provide up to 30 minutes for public comment, and to discuss issues related to the proposed land use change and provide general commentary to the applicant. And no straw poll or vote occurs as part of this discussion. And so this is really the heart attack test,
Right.
with a better name.
Informally that,
Yeah.
yes, but it's the formal process.
The
to
formal process now.
bring it to you.
Yeah. And so the only thing is I looked at this and read through it, and it's only because I don't know my street numbers well enough. Where does this exactly sit on Main Street? I know Alan can probably tell me exactly.
My street dead ends right just to the west of it.
Okay.
So it sits between the Elms
Okay.
and Blair on the north side of Main Street. So there's 2 empty houses there.
Yes.
The red one, it was I think a multifamily, and then there was a yellow brick.
Okay.
That's right there.
So it's to
Van Orwick would
the
have
east
the-
of Van Nortwick.
Oh, no, west of Van Orwick.
Okay.
So there's townhouses on the corner of Van Orwick.
Yeah, okay.
2 of them with the parking lot
Yep.
behind it, and then this would be to the west of that.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Side.
Thank you. I can picture it in my mind now. I just was having a hard time figuring out where this would fit in. So does anyone have any questions of staff about this?
I have one. As you all know, I have a number of friends in the fire service, and I recently been chatting with some of them up in the northwest suburbs who were participants in the story up at Prospect Heights a few weeks ago when they had that. And I guess I'm just asking, our building code standards on a building like this, what are we doing to divide the units? We used to have masonry walls between them. We don't anymore, correct?
Drywall and sprinklers,
The drywall and sprinkler?
yes.
This will be sprinklered then? Okay, and I'm done.
Mr. Mayor?
Which is a big
And that was going to be my
Prospect
main
Heights.
question, was just to make sure that it was sprinkled.
Anybody else? Mike?
What is, with drywall, what is the fire rating on that? Is it 2 layers?
It would be 1 hour,
Just a 1 hour?
so it would be 1 layer on each side.
Anyone else?
Should we follow the guidelines that we've set for this and allow the applicant up to 10 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. Is the applicant here?
Yes, John Green is here representing the applicant.
Okay, terrific.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for your time. My name is John Green. My company is Engineering Resource Associates, and I'm a civil engineer, and I represent the applicant, Ken Bernhard from Seaburn Homes. His office is located and situated in St. Charles, Illinois, and he couldn't be here tonight. He has parents in Florida that are under the weather, and he's with them, so he asked me to present on his behalf. This proposal involves annexation into the city of Batavia. Currently, the 2 existing properties contain single-family homes that are vacant. They're on well and septic, so the project involves connectivity to city utilities, sanitary water main extensions across the front of the property, full compliance with the city stormwater management code. The rear of the property, or the green space on the screen in front of you, would be a detention pond that would store the 100-year storm event. Of course, there's an industrial property to the north, a city, I believe, pumping station property to the north as well. To the west of the subject property is the Wyrick Drilling a business that extends from Main Street all the way through to the right-of-way to the north. The property to the west of us is an existing townhome development on the corner of Van Nortwick and Main. That development has 8 units on a little bit less than an acre of land. And by sake of comparison, this property is about 1.5 acres, and we're proposing 10 units. So there's a stair step down in density. The density of the existing Van Nortwick townhomes is about 10 units per acre. And we're somewhere around 6 or so. With the industrial classifications to the north, and of course the street to the north, First Street, is all duplexes in that. We work with staff extensively. We've had several different design team meetings over the last couple of years, and we felt that this density would work and be conducive as transitional buffering from the higher density to both to the north and to the east. Of course, kitty corner to this is the Elms Restaurant, and that also represents the border of our city's West Town TIF district. So we're just outside of that. And perhaps this is something, this type of redevelopment in this area is something that the TIF district even longs for, just as in terms of the focus for the West Town area. I'm going to flip to, I know this isn't a detailed review, but I have some other building elevations and floor plans and some different zoning maps to look through with you. This is our proposed front elevation. There are 5 units per building. The units are staggered from an in and out standpoint to kind of break up the streetscape. There's at least 50% stone and masonry on the front elevations as we're showing it conceptually, and the units are flip-flopped to create some undulation and curiosity in the streetscape. These are units that have garage-level entries on the rear of the property, so the adjacent property owners across the street are screened from any overhead garage doors. Each unit would have a 2-car garage on the ground level. The middle of you, if you would be the kitchen and living room and den area. And then the top level would be where 3 bedrooms were located. So the footprint of each unit is roughly 22 feet wide by 50 feet in deep, so roughly 1,000 square foot footprint times 3 levels of living space. Of course, half of the basement is a 2-car garage. This is a rough footprint of the ground level. This is your rear elevation, and it will be buffering the adjacent industrial properties with a detention pond and screening. And these double slider doors represent the kitchen sliders above the garage, and the railings are not shown here for graphical purposes, but each unit will have a 4 or 5 or 6 foot deep deck, the width of the unit as well. This looks like the upper level, top floor living space, the master bedroom, stairway, 2 bathrooms, 2 bedrooms along the rear. This is a land use exhibit that we prepared as part of the application. I want to call your attention to the unincorporated and City Batavia city limits. Our corporate limits are represented by this red line. This is the Elms Restaurant right here, where I'm circling. This is the approximately 10 units per acre Van Nortwick homes right on the corner. This is the subject property. A majority of it is unincorporated and would involve annexation. The subject property is comprised of 5 individual parcels. The rear 2 pieces of land are actually within the city limits, but they are vacant. Of course, Wyrick's Drilling is this property. It's a through property from Main Street up to First. And then there are about 9 or 10 individual other properties that between us and then where Batavia High School is as you go to the west. And then, of course, Van Nortwick has some duplexes both along the west side of Van Nortwick and then along First Street, adjacent to the city property at this location. And so in summary, we are anxious to start our process, and we've been working with city staff over the last year or 2. We have documents ready to go, and we're anxious for submittal, but we wanted to come through this process first, just to confirm we're all on the same page before we do engineering and landscaping and architectural submittals. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Okay, anyone have any questions of the applicant? Mark?
It's a pretty heavily wooded property. How much of that do you intend on retaining?
We do have a tree survey and tree inventory prepared. There was some clearing that happened on the property out of kind of safety considerations in the last year or so. We have everything documented. We believe what remains in majority will be able to be preserved. I will note, though, that over 50% of the species on the site today are mulberries, buckthorns, and cottonwoods. So although they're green, they're not, hardly any of them are on the city's desirable species list. So we do already have a landscape plan prepared that will complement and supplement what's out there.
Thank you.
What is the price point for these townhomes? Do you know? Yeah?
I don't know exactly, but I would imagine perhaps starting in the low 4s.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lucy.
All right, so it looks like in the back, the only exit, and I think you said this, was through the garage door. So the garage door has to be raised in order to walk out of the house, is that correct?
Yes.
And then how many stairs up in the front?
The entry level at the front of the building will be mid-rise or mid-level. So typically, if you have a 9-foot first floor, you need about 14 steps to get from one level to the next, 14 total. The way this is planned out is we'll have half of the steps on the outside of the building, an outside front porch, concrete with a railing. You'll enter the front door, and then when you enter, you'll have a choice to go up approximately 7 more additional steps to the main living space, or to go back down 7 steps to the ground level where the garage is.
Anyone else have questions?
So there's obviously no ADA compliance or anything like that?
There is not. I know the developer is considering as an option perhaps a limited use elevator.
Anyone else have any questions? Marty?
No, just a comment. I did speak with several of the neighbors in the area that are pretty proximate to it, and they spoke highly of the transition downward instead of upward for what could have been, so they did like that. They felt it was a much needed improvement in the area for it, and so they appreciated that, and they were fairly excited about it.
Sure, thank you. I will just add for the record that we did send out mailings to all property owners within 500 feet of the property.
And that was some of the, I did receive the calls from people that did get it, wondering what it was for, and others did know about it.
Okay, thanks.
I like the fact that it's all a street front, that all the garages load from the rear, and that, the articulation is a little more like a downtown street.
I guess, does anyone else from the council have any questions?
Egress. I mean, God forbid there's a fire, the way out is either the front or the garage.
There's also a balcony off the mid-level of the unit, so yeah, garage door, which would either be electronic or the emergency pull, and in terms of a power outage or emergency, and then the front door as well.
Okay.
I have one question.
Lucy?
I've heard, and your ear is to the ground, that it's very common now to put elevators in new residences. And if there's not an elevator, there's a closet for an elevator. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so that's why he's considering it.
Anyone else? Okay, then I guess we can open it up for public comment. If
Turn it
anyone.
over to staff.
Oh, is that the next step?
Yep.
10 minutes for staff to add relevant information. Come on, staff.
I was going to say there really probably isn't any more to add that wasn't already in the report. The one item I'll just mention for housekeeping, we did find out that we had to update our GIS map that actually the properties involved are 915 and 919. We had basically an address that's actually west of the property on this property. So that's been fixed, but otherwise there's really no other, unless there's questions from the council.
Do you foresee any concessions, anything that we should be thinking about early on in this process? Just kind of out of curiosity, whenever we talk about connecting to city water and sewer and things, we haven't had any developments in the works like this for a while that's an infill in existing property, but yet does not have water and sewer. What should we be prepared for mentally as we move through this process?
Well, I think, they will need to connect to city utilities as part of this process. This is an annexation agreement, so that if there's anything that is beyond city code that the city is looking for, or if the council wants to give direction for certain things that they'd want to see beyond what the city code requires, there is the opportunity to request that or require that as part of the annexation.
Okay.
So I guess I would generally leave it at that. I believe there are, in terms of utilities, Public Works has looked at this, and I believe we've got adequate utilities within the area to serve this. It's just it is a bump up in the density from what's on the comp plan at this point, because it's basically identifying the existing residential, the single family residential that's on the property. So.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
Susan?
Mark?
I don't know if you know that, I could ask the applicant too, I just forgot about it. In the back with the driveway area, is some of that intended to be off-street parking as well, or is that too tight to?
I believe there is, at least, I believe they've identified these as parallel spaces for guest parking. This area is the dumpster enclosure, essentially. And each building would have the potential for 2 guest spaces, provided that their garages are available for their own cars. They haven't been filled with storage.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Dave?
So Drew, I imagine, maybe this is a question for John, I'm not sure, but I imagine this would be the occupants there would have an HOA?
Yes, it would need to have an HOA because of the detention, and I would assume for townhomes purposes you would need it for the common amenities and walls and so forth, roof.
And I know, as John mentioned also, you've been working with them for over a year on this. Is there anything that you haven't been able to work out with the right-of-way on Main Street, or whatever improvements are required, or?
No, I don't think we've identified anything that hasn't been agreeable with John and his team. So, I think we'll have to give, once the formal submission arrives, we'll have more detail to be looking at, but at this stage, we haven't identified anything that we're not eye to eye on at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, now we'll move to public comment, which is number 3. Does anyone in the public have anything they'd want to address about this? If so, come on up, please.
Oh, I have to go up there?
Yes, you do. Sorry, it's your chance to be on camera.
Oh, yeah.
And we need to get
A little
your,
bit more nervous.
We just need your name for the record, please.
Beth Taylor, and we live on the Van Nortwick townhomes, and we got your letter, so thank you. We were very happy to be part of the process, and your letter was very well-written and explained a lot. I guess our major concern is to see the landscaping, because that will be very important to us since we butt up against this, that there is some green space, and the ratio of parking, guest parking, and driveway to green space will be extremely important to us. So, if there's another meeting with that, we'd like to be involved with that. I know with our building, when they built our building, the off-street parking was very important. So I appreciate your question, because I'm sure there won't be any parking on Main Street. And I think that was all the questions we have. My husband's the president of our board, so if there's any questions, he could be contacted too. But definitely landscaping would be important, because we look out onto that and we didn't buy next to a parking lot. So it would be important for us to not have to be next to a parking lot, so.
okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, and I guess we will end the public comment. And then, so now it's time for us to discuss the proposed land use change and any general commentary we may have. No straw polls, no votes.
I'm just going to say, Susan, that I'm supportive of the proposed development, and, it sounds like they've gotten everything worked out with staff as far as what they can to this point. Certainly the neighbors' concerns, I'm sure Mr. Green heard them. Maybe a few extra bushes might not hurt anything, but I'm supportive of the project in general.
I would have to say that I'm very supportive of this too. I'm very pleased with the varied front elevation. I like that it looks like row homes, and it has back rear loading garages. I think that'll be a really nice addition to Main Street. I think that this further shows that when people look at Batavia, they look at more higher end development at that price point. I'm intrigued. I think this is a very interesting project for us. Anyone else? Marty?
Yeah, I also fully support it, and I'm also, having worked and seen other projects that John has done over the years, I think as a neighbor, it's going to be everything you kind of want, with him listening to you and being agreeable to making sure that you get a quality neighbor that's going to go in. Of that, I don't have any doubt.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, you have your non-vote.
Okay, thank you. John, do you have any further questions, or? Okay. All right, then we're going to move on to the next item, which is item 7. Let me back up here just for a moment, since the neighbors are here. The next step in the process for this proposal.
Sure. The next step, this is a pre-application process that they voluntarily went through. So the next step would be the formal application, as was mentioned, for annexation, because the property needs to be brought into the city limits. That application would include a comprehensive plan, land use amendment, a request for zoning for the property, and then design review for the appearance of the site and the all the design details. So it would be dependent on, once they apply formally as the applicant, and once they apply, after there's a staff review conducted, and the drawings are to the point where it can be brought to a public hearing. A public hearing will be scheduled and brought to the Plan Commission. All owners within 500 feet will receive notice for that, as well as there will be a signpost on the property saying what the hearing date would be, and notice in the newspaper, all as required by code. So it would be dependent on when they submit, but then that begins the process of the public review.
Thank you.
Quick question, was the 500-foot limit mailings for this stage, was that required?
That is required for the formal initial land use process. So if they are coming before you, we do require that notice occur prior to the, I believe it's 10 or 15 days prior to the meeting, so.
But I mean, for tonight, was it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is required for this process.
Okay, just making sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go on to item 7, which is Resolution 18-94R, sale of municipal-owned real estate on Danforth Drive. Alderman Stark.
Okay, so,
I skipped one, didn't I? We'll go, no, I'm good. I'm
no,
good.
Danforth
Okay.
is right. City Council sold 5 separate parcels between Danforth and Garfield Street in 2016 and 17, and there is one remaining unsold parcel. And we were not able, and staff was not able to come to terms with a potential buyer. And staff has reopened negotiations with the owner, and he believes that they're willing to purchase the property at this time. Staff revised the cost of the land based on the plan of survey prepared, as well as allowance under state statute to reduce the allowable selling price. The adjacent owner has stated they would be willing to purchase the property at the reduced price of $7,272.72, which is the lowest price at the 80% of appraised value sale method. The city, of course, will reserve easements for public utilities and drainage over the entire property, and a public access easement over the eastern part of the property where the public sidewalk encroaches onto the land. The owners have stated they'll agree to a 3-year payment plan, where after that time and all payments are made, the city would record a deed to the land for these buyers. It should be noted that we need to advertise the property for general sale, so we could, but are probably unlikely to, receive a more favorable offer for the land. City Council needs to approve the motion to sell this land by a 2/3 majority of the City Council. If this is done, we will proceed with advertising the property for sale via bid procedures, and then they'll present the bids to the council for action sometime in September. So our alternatives are we can sell the property or not sell the property. Pros, selling it would provide immediate revenue to the city, as well as put the sold parcel back on the tax rolls. And it would also relieve us of any maintenance responsibilities. Cons, we would no longer have control over the sold property other than for utility and drainage. We would end up retaining an easement for the existing and future public utilities, as well as the sidewalk that is partially on this property. Budget impact, of course, we're going to receive revenue for the land as well as property tax revenues, and there's no staffing impact other than what's already been handled and then preparing the deed, et cetera. Timeline for action, there's no specific timeline, but they are interested now. And so staff recommends that we move to approve Resolution 1894R. Any questions? Scott Salvati.
Just for the record, because we're allowing them to pay in 3 payments, what happens if they pay 2 payments and not the 3rd?
This would be a rent-to-own situation, so if they don't make the 3rd payment, then they forfeit their ability to purchase the property.
Anyone else? Mike?
Are we charging them interest?
No, we are not. Just flat payments.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to send to Council Resolution 1894R, sale of municipally owned real estate on Danforth Drive?
So moved.
Motion by Callahan, second by Wolf. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And this, of course, as was stated, has to have a 2/3 approval at council before we can put it out to bid, or advertise it out to bid. Okay. So that motion passed, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8, ordinance 18-55, establishing an SSA 62 for Batavia Main Street. Alderman Stark.
Okay. This is a continuation of a conversation that we've had before. And the question is, should the city establish a special service area, number 62, for Batavia Main Street? And on June 18th, 2018, we approved ordinance 1831, proposing the establishment of a special service area, number 62. And that ordinance set a public hearing date of August 20th to hear testimony on establishing the SSA. Upon closing of the public hearing, the City Council would then vote on ordinance 1855, establishing the Main Street SSA. After the close of the hearing, a petition can be filed to object to the SSA no later than October 19th. And this is, we've talked before, the SSA would need to be, or the petition would need to be signed by 51% of the electors and 51% of the owners of recorded record of land opposing the SSA. If a valid petition is received by the city by then, the SSA cannot be formed. However, if no petition is received or a petition is received that does not contain the required number of signatures, then the SSA is formed. As discussed, the new SSA would have a $100,000 levy cap and an indefinite life of the SSA. And we did that and talked about that at council so that it gives Main Street a little bit more flexibility, as well as we don't have to go through this every year or two.
5 years.
5 years. Gosh, time flies. The ordinance would allow a levy of up to $100,000, but the city is not obligated to grant the maximum levy. The ordinance requires Main Street to make a specific levy request by August 1st of each year. If they do not make a specific request, the levy automatically goes to the current $40,000 level for that year. In addition, the city council may also terminate the SSA at any time by passing an ordinance to rescind the SSA. And if memory serves me right, they asked for $40,000 by August 1st.
Correct. They're not asking for an
coming
increase
year.
in levy for this particular year, right?
Okay. Our alternatives are approve the ordinance 1855 establishing the special service area number 62 for Main Street, or direct the staff to amend the ordinance in some manner, or do not approve the ordinance and let the current SSA lapse later this year. The pros, establishing the SSA would allow for continued funding for Main Street via the SSA tax levied on downtown property owners. Cons, the SSA taxes property owners more than other property owners in order to partially fund Main Street operations and the downtown property owners. Budget impact, the cost of establishing the SSA will be paid for by the city unless these are to be paid for by Main Street or incorporated into the SSA funds. These ran over $1,300 for the mailing and publication costs alone for SSA 57. Staffing impact, staff time will be expended for a number of hours in preparing ordinances, publishing notices, and sending out mailings for the creation of the SSA. Timeline for action, it expires at the end of this year. We would need to approve a new SSA by November to ensure continued funding via the SSA tax. So I'm sure there's some questions on this one. Helen.
One more procedure on here. In one spot in the memo, it said it would be 51% of the electors residing in the SSA, and then in the actual ordinance says 51% of the electors or 51% of the owners.
Should be both.
It should be both?
Both,
Okay, well, then we
yes.
need
So
to
we'll
correct
correct that before
correct
council,
that
yes.
In that, I read through it, just reading it again, and I saw that it just doesn't make sense that it was two different ways in there.
Right.
That's the only thing I have at this point.
Lucy?
Chris or Scott, can you jog my memory? Have we ever done some sort of evaluation, or is Main Street, on how property values are, what's happening to property values downtown? Maybe as a result of what Main Street's doing or the other things we've done?
I can't say that we've done an evaluation of property values specifically with respect to Main Street, except that the property values have gone up in the downtown for the last several years, at least the last 2 to 3 years. That's mostly market-based, natural inflation due to real estate market. But I think you'll find, assuming I do my presentation tonight in the mid-year report, that there's been significant activity just in the last 6 or 7 months in the downtown with respect to new businesses and new building occupancies. And I think that at least in part speaks to, the desirability of having your business downtown. And when a new business comes into a building, that over time reduces supply naturally, which of course increases rent rates. And when rent rates go up, assessed values go up. Because most of the buildings downtown, they're assessed by virtue of an income approach based on rent rates.
So what rent rate, so how have rent rates increased?
Then
You're going to talk to us
show you
about
that
that?
very same thing tonight.
Okay. It's been, someone asked me this question, and
No, it's a good
felt
question.
that they have not maybe seen the increase in value that they would have liked. So.
You will see in my slides, the vacancy rates have dropped significantly in the downtown over the last 5 years. And you'll also see that the rent rates have climbed. So again, supply and demand, I think, you have to give some of the credit, I would like to think, to Main Street for that.
Chris, I have a question of you because you're a representative of the city on Main Street's board, correct?
I have sat on the board over the years. I don't know that I was actually a voting member of the board per se, but I have sat on the board over the last 5 years.
Okay. One of the questions I have that I haven't been able to get an answer on in terms of what Main Street is and who it serves. And the only reason I ask that question is because several people after Cocktails in the Clark Park said to me, why is it that the president of the Main Street Board is not a downtown business owner? Why isn't it 100% Main Street focused? And I can't give a good answer to that because voting members have gone out as far as, Kay Hollis Jewelry and up as far as Gibby's Wine Den when it used to be in business. And so that to me, considering it's called Batavia Main Street, and the focus is a very designated area in downtown, how is it that that happens? And I've not been able to give anyone a suitable answer to that. So if we could kind of be able to answer that, that would be great. Alan?
I remember having that question posed, and I don't remember where we were at downtown at something happening. And one of the people mentioned in that group there said it was focused more on what business owners could put into downtown. It didn't matter if they were in downtown or not, but if they felt like they needed to be involved in that or they had something to give to that organization to try to make good things happen downtown, they should be part of that. Similar to what the chamber would do, but on a more localized level. And the reality of them not owning a business downtown really didn't matter because they wanted to help focus that energy downtown into the Main Street programs for downtown.
Okay, that's a good point. And I think that from a business perspective, that needs to be communicated a little bit better because people have opened businesses out of this particular area who have not been approached or talked to at all by Main Street. And so that's why I'm trying to get to be able to say to people, I have nothing to do with Main Street other than we fund it partially, but I'd kind of like to know the parameters in terms of how people are part of the Main Street organization. Scott?
So I guess, Lucy, my question is to you real quick. It was the comment you made from the person that was talking to you, were they insinuating that the metric for Main Street was to be by property valuation increases in terms of the value of Main Street to the city?
Okay, let me see if I understand what you're saying. So they felt, they received the letter, were concerned that their fees might be going up, and questioned what value they were getting for paying for this. And they didn't feel that their property value or the values around had increased enough to support this.
Right. And I guess having been around for quite some time and been to a gazillion of their events, I think one of the other things to look at how Main Street operates is they're a function of driving people into the city for events. So, we've had some unbelievable success with, Windmill City and with, Oktoberfest and all those. So, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know if you can.
I don't think he was saying that Main Street wasn't a great organization.
Yeah.
Just questioning being responsible for paying, it's just this downtown area that's paying for it.
Right.
And all these other businesses around are benefiting.
It's legitimate, yeah.
So that wasn't exactly his argument, but I can see where he was going with it.
It's one of those quantifiable things that there should be able to be, we should be able to attach a number to it.
Sure.
And so if a property owner downtown who's paying for this in their SSA doesn't feel they're getting a value, then at some point we have to be able to say, this is the value you're gaining. Versus someone who's out on the fringe edges who their contribution is via, they're buying a banner. So that's where it gets kind of.
And I would say that depending on the property owner and the type of business that they have may be impacted differently by Main Street, right? I mean, so.
But it does come down to what rent they get.
Sure.
And when they decide to sell it, what they can sell it for. And though it's improving, it may be still hard to measure because there aren't that many transactions.
There aren't, but the market does react to raising rents in a downtown district. So although a property may not have changed over, the assumption is you're going to be at market rate. So You may not see the change of rate right away, right, until a new lease is signed, or in some cases, a new business comes in. But it's just like your home. Your home is increasing in value. It's only a paper increase until you sell it. It's the same way with rent rates. You may not be getting that rent rate at the time, but the market's telling you if you were to turn this around and put it out there as available space, you should be able to get that. But I did want to briefly answer Susan's comment, because the current president actually, well, he's actually a Main Street property owner, or business, but meaning on West Main Street. He's not within the downtown district, but the Patrick Moynihan is the current president.
Right.
And he's out on West Main, not in the downtown. And Bob Hanson, for instance, is a board member, and he's at Funway. I don't know two people that bring more energy to that board and more concern and passion about the downtown than those two guys. Rob Hollis is another example. It's hard to say where Rob actually works per se, but his wife has a place out on Randall Road, but yet his vested interest, he believes in the downtown. What's good for the downtown is good for his wife's business even, because it's good for economic activity. And my last comment, the prior president was Kurt Hageman, and you know, Kurt had to leave the board because he was on for several consecutive terms. So I believe the people that are on that board have true interest in the downtown, notwithstanding whether their business is actually located there.
No, and I totally agree with you. I know all three gentlemen who, you know, you spoke to, Marcia Boyce when she was on the, all of these people are terrific supporters of Main Street. But it comes down to the SSA and who's paying for, you know, the $40,000 to $100,000 chunk of Main Street. And that's where sometimes I'm like, well, how does this work? People who are not contributing financially in the SSA are running the show. Mark.
I would only say that whoever wants to be on the board should approach the board executive director and let her know, him that they'd like to be considered for, you know, to apply for board membership, because they do have turnover, and of course we're always looking for new blood. So I think just let them know that there's an interest. You might have to wait for the next term, but that's probably a good idea.
Mark, you had a question?
More of a comment. I mean, it is a tough thing, and I don't know where you draw the line, because I guarantee you McDonald's revenue goes up dramatically on anything that happens near Peg Bond. However, if you look at that map, I mean, I can't remember if it's like law firms or whatever that are just south of Main Street. What are they getting out of it? But where do you stop? You have to stop from a business versus residential. You can't just say, well, it's only going to affect Wilson Street, and ideally it stays at $40,000. I mean, I think that's the biggest question this owner had was, and Lucy and I got the same correspondence, that, you know, if it's 10%, potentially a 10% increase to what I'm paying, has the value of my property gone up by 10%? And probably not. I don't think I read the report a little bit. I don't think that value has gone up that much because of this. And I don't know, and for those that know, maybe I don't know if Main Street has said, hey, by the way, Oktoberfest brought down X thousand amount of people for those 3 days. And we already know that the farmers market brings down 1,000 people or more. So we do know that the people are there. It just, to this guy's point, how do I know that that's having a benefit for me? Because again, it's not going to have probably not going to have a benefit for a lawyer on Main Street, but maybe it does for, again, McDonald's. So, Mike?
So I guess my question is, are we getting an accurate assessment of the value of Main Street? No, I support Main Street, but, you know, to Mark's point, you know, building owners are being required to pay the bulk of this, and I think property values have gone up due to what Main Street does, but also, you know, the city has paid for 3 streetscapes in our downtown, and I believe that has contributed significantly to the value of property in our downtown and have brought businesses to our downtown. So how do we assess exactly what Main Street is bringing to the table?
Well, I guess in summation of this is that the property owners do have the ability to contest the SSA. And so if 51% of them want to sign a petition to not create the SSA, they have that right. And so I'm curious as to, Scott? Go ahead.
No.
Oh, no, the city handles all of the mailings and everything for the SSA?
We did, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the questions too, is does the city want to continue to pay that, the fees for this, or do we want that to be a direct pass-through to Main Street? Should Main Street be paying for their own fees for the SSA?
Well, in theory, this would be the last time we do that. So, we can take the fees for that from the, SSA revenues if we wish to do that, but, this would in theory be the last time if we, the way we're proposing it, so.
One question I have is, if they come back, say they 2-3 years in a row, they ask for 10,000 or 20,000 more, or whatever, do we have to do the mailing and everything again to raise?
No, I believe we have to publish a notice.
Just publish notice at that point?
Levy.
Once it's established, then we would just, to raise it, we would only have to do public notice.
Right, I believe it's over 5%, then we have to do the notice to, increase the levy and all that, but I think that's as far as we have to go.
Elliot?
I think he had his hand up first.
Oh, sorry, then Marty.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, from the conversations that I've had with this one, I've seen kind of both sides of it. I think Main Street does obviously a phenomenal job. Lord knows I love Oktoberfest. But thinking about why do they do a great job, we always keep going back over to, well, the people that are on Main Street are the ones that are really leading it, and they're doing it, knocking it out of the park. But I have to remove the particular people out of that and just think about the organization itself as to what it is and what its purpose is. And as much as I love some of these events, if we're hearing from the owners that they're not necessarily seeing any sort of an influx of business, even though there's people coming downtown, is it worth it to them to have this SSA put upon them? And that's where I'm kind of struggling with this one. And particularly where I'm struggling with this one is that while I appreciate the fact that year over year it has to be renewed as to the amount of levy that is going to be put upon it, which is good, I'm not necessarily guaranteed to be here year over year beyond the end of my term. And so is the next person going to have a similar mindset to what I would, which is if Main Street's supposed to be self-sufficient and self-supporting going forward and not have this moving forward, what's to stop it from going up to that 100K? And are we putting the owners in a position where they have to come to that 50% plus threshold? Is that fair to them who have already invested themselves into the downtown? That's where I'm kind of struggling.
No, go ahead, Scott.
The ultimate decision on what that levy is going to be is up to the council. Right. So that's structured. So if the council, this council, future councils don't want to levy $100,000, you're not under any obligation to do so.
Marty?
Part of the last discussion along the lines of who's getting value, we've been talking about the business side of it, yet there are, albeit a handful, of residential properties that are in here.
Right.
They can apply for, I don't forget if it's called a refund or a rebate along those lines. How much is that paid into that 40 and goes out? Obviously, it's not a lot, but it would still be some.
Right.
But I remember I was looking for something a little more proactively to let the residents in those residential areas know that they can apply for that, just so that there's a little more transparency in it, saying, there's only 6 of you, but we don't want that to be a benefit that they could choose to exercise. Which then kind of goes to the larger picture of who's actually benefiting from an SSA. Do those 6 residents who have residential properties benefit much more than the rest of us who go downtown for these events? Or are those 6 residents funding our enjoyment of the benefits of the SSA? And just for a parity, should it be that if the regular residents are also, should we be contributing or not? And what's the value of that?
Well, that's our $40,000 contribution by the city.
Right.
We do.
Mark?
Is this the only opportunity that these business owners would have to object to the SSA? Could they, if 75% of them put together a petition 3 years from now saying, we don't want this anymore, can it be removed at some point in the future?
Well, from the formality standpoint of creating an SSA, the process is to submit a petition with the 51%. If at a subsequent date, the business owners come and say, what, this is horrible, they're doing a terrible job, and we just don't think we should be funding anymore, the redress would be to come to the city council and say, hey, you know what, we really don't think we should be funding this anymore, and then the city council ultimately can just pass an ordinance to rescind the SSA. It's pretty simple. So it's real complicated to create it. It's very simple actually to remove it.
But it'd be an informal process at that point.
Informal
There's nothing they
process. I
could
mean, we would have to
formally
pass an
do.
ordinance to rescind it, but I mean, it would be very simple.
Any other comments? Mike Rosato?
Do we know what the percentage is of the actual owners of the building operate businesses out of those buildings?
I don't know if we have any statistics on that, Chris. Do you know?
Or are the majority rented?
The majority are rented.
Okay. So we have very few people that own buildings on there that actually operate businesses out of their own building.
I don't know very few means, but certainly I would say definitely less than 50% are owner-occupied businesses. I mean, there are some certainly.
Right.
I guess I would look at that as if you're owning it and you're leasing it or renting it, that's your business.
Right.
And that's where you're making your money. So if it's working and people are downtown and you're able to rent or lease that space out, your business is working.
Marty?
Just as you were saying that about the once going forward in response to him, this is supposed to be a three-party partnership with the city, the Main Street, and the owners. But after it's passed, it's no longer a partnership, because then really the third party no longer has any say or control in the process.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a function of the way the statute is for creating SSAs. I mean, yeah, I mean, the property owners, their objection, if they were going to want to do that now, would have to do that as part of this process. But, I would assume that if you were faced with, 50% of the business owners saying, this is a horrible thing, you'd have to really reconsider, whether you'd want to continue this SSA or not. It would be a, political issue, obviously, but, I mean, that would be something you'd have to consider as is that good for the community or not?
Scott?
I think when they presented, was in June, one of the things that they were open to was full transparency and say, hey, we'll provide you with documentation, with financials, with all that, which obviously we have access to. But we talked about at that point a little more accountability from them, not accountability, but more reporting per se. So we could see numerically and quantify a little bit more the impact, as opposed to going, I think they did okay this year. And we'd like to see, what kind of numbers that they have, because they can quantify that, right. And I know they do.
Right, and I think from the standpoint, Main Street, typically gives us a report every month, right. and maybe that's something that we want to see as some more numbers issues and things like that. I will say that the new director is here, so he can, come up if he wishes to do so and introduce himself and speak a little bit about it, but I figured, good opportunity to let him say something.
Thanks, Scott. I think, to your point, Scott, what happens is like Cocktails in the Park is a very well-attended event. It's on a Saturday night. No businesses in town are open. So we're bringing, 500 people to downtown to what benefit of the business community, if that's what Main Street's purpose is. So that's where it gets kind of murky. The farmers market does great on Saturday mornings, but most of the businesses still aren't open, and it's on River Street, and so it's not in the downtown area. So it gets to that, like, where is the benefit, the cost benefit part of this? So that's why I bring this up, just because there are, I've talked to renters who've said, well, I don't pay this. Well, yeah, you do. You pay it in your rent. And they want to know what benefit they're getting from it. And I can't quantify it because we don't have any, everything we come up with is anecdotal.
Right.
So, okay.
Hi.
Introduce yourself.
Christopher Faber, the new executive director of Batavia Main Street. And if you want to, ask some direct questions, I've been on the job for 15 days, so I'll do my best. But, you're right. Some things are difficult to quantify. Chris has numbers that can talk about property values and things like that. But how many people come in and where does McDonald's do when there's an event going down and that kind of stuff. Retail sales tax. It's not just about raising rents and raising property values. It's also about keeping these businesses making more money and things like that. So there are some things there, but I guess what I'd like to say is I'm open to the conversation. So if you guys have some ideas of what you'd like to see to quantify that, I'm totally ready to discuss that and see what we can bring to you, because you're right, a lot of it is anecdotal. And, does the lawyer or the CPA get a ton of benefit from people being down at Oktoberfest? Probably not so much, but Gaetano's is loaded on every Saturday morning with farmers markets. So different businesses are certainly going to benefit in different ways, and I would think that the lawyer, for example, really their benefit's going to come more from the hopefully general property tax or property value increase for everybody, as opposed to really bringing in new clients from being down here. I did want to address one thing that got brought up with who is actually in. So everybody in the gray map there is a member of Batavia Main Street, similar to if you were a member of the Chamber of Commerce. They don't pay anything extra. The SSA is their membership fee. So those people are members. The guidelines for who is on the board, there are, I believe it's 13 voting members. There can be more members. So if a business that is outside of there but has an interest wants to be on, they can come in, even if they're not a voting member, they can come in and be part of the organization. And as far as, our guidelines kind of leave it open in the bylaws as far as the businesses like Patrick Moynihan or Bob to come in and be, even though you're not a member of the SSA, you are a Batavia resident, you are a Batavia business, and our bylaws allow those people to come in and be a member of the board as well. I'd say that's one of the things that maybe speaks to the success of Main Street is the fact that these people who aren't members, they don't get the direct membership benefit that everybody else does, but they're still in here putting in the work and kicking in their money too. So I think that kind of tells us something. The other thing I think that comes to mind is the fact that the SSA kicks in $40,000, the city kicks in another $40,000. That's still less than a third of our budget. Most of that money is coming from revenue that we raise, and what that tells me is that these businesses that aren't even in downtown necessarily, but are in Batavia or even in the region, that are coming in and dropping money on sponsorships and all that stuff for our events, they see a value in spending that kind of money. And so the fact that we're able to, run our budget so well without having, separate from just the tax dollars, to me that shows that there is a benefit there. Obviously they see it or they wouldn't be writing that check for every event that they get. And the people that aren't members of Batavia Main Street, the only way they get their names on things is to be a specific sponsor of an individual event.
Mm-hmm. Anyone have any questions for Christopher?
No, more towards what Scott was talking about earlier, but a little bit. As we're talking about the partnership between all parties, you had said about the nature of the statute is that kind of once it's established, the owners don't necessarily have a say anymore. Is there anything preemptory or prohibitive that would allow us to make some changes in that? And the reason why I was initially concerned about the limits that we heard, the $100,000 limit forever, people were, oh my God, that's going to be, we won't have any say. But if they come back to us and say, we need 60,000 this year, when you have the establishment at the 40,000, everybody knows, all the business owners, and you're a partner in on that. Would there be anything to preempt that if that request is made, that all three partners come back together and say, the request is for another 20,000. It gives those that feel they're not getting the value that they need, maybe they feel that it's 40, but not 60. And when you're having that partnership, that as part of the process, you allow our votes to go, that we voted, but also have the business owners be able to file a petition and say, no, 51% of us don't feel that 60,000 is okay. Is there anything that would preempt that? And why couldn't we do something like that?
Could we just add to the ordinance that whenever they ask for a raise in it, that it's incumbent on them to notify their membership that that's going to be coming before us, and if they want to speak about it, they have to be here?
Well, that's why I'm asking, because you had said state law sets up that mechanism. And I want to see if there's anything that we have in our authority that would allow for that we're not preempted from doing that.
Let me drag Peggy into this a little bit. Peggy, if we had a levy that was, going from 40,000 to 80,000, that requires certain notice in the paper, I believe, for that kind of thing. Okay, so there would be a public hearing on the increase because of that. And I would note that when we had SSA 57, when we set that up, we had a whole list of parameters of things that were supposed to be coming from the property owners about reporting and, I can't remember all the exact things, but I mean, there was a whole laundry list of things that the property owners were supposed to be providing to justify, Main Street every year. We never received anything. I don't know if Main Street themselves directly got that, but, we as staff here at the city, we never received anything for that. So we put it in there kind of as a way to create some accountability, but, nobody decided to give us that information during that period of time.
And Chris, something you said just struck me just as a minute ago. When you're part of the chamber, you pay to be part of the chamber, and you can either choose to be part of the chamber or not choose to be part of the chamber. The people in the SSA for Main Street don't have a choice. They pay whether they want to or not. There's no opting out of that. And so that's where the biggest difference is in terms of why we pay such close attention to the taxing that happens in this particular area. Mark?
Chris, I think, we have presentations from the departments here twice a year about what's going on. I think that would be good to see something, hey, here's our financials, here's what we've spent, here's what we've earned, here's the number of people that we think we've brought to Batavia on these events. And on top of that, do you guys publish that to the members on a regular basis?
Not that I'm aware of, but don't quote me. Actually, Chris might be able to address that a little more.
At the monthly meetings, they do give the budget breakdown of expenditures, both within that subject period as well as an ongoing basis. So the treasurer makes a report every month, and we know what's been spent by line item. We know what revenues have come in, typically for fundraising events. Twice a year, obviously, the city kicks in the SSA payment. So the members are, and typically there is a city council member sitting on the board that kind of acts as the ombudsman as well as the voice of the council. When there's not one, staff has been there. I generally provide that budget information to Laura when we get it each month.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to have something where you can at least email those business owners saying, here's our monthly report, and that way they have a little bit more information, because I don't think that they know.
I agree.
Scott?
Going back to Marty's point, I think what he's trying to say is, talking about representation and the fact that we're a party, Main Street's a party, but this ownership which is not organized, is the third leg of that stool, right? And I think what Marty's trying to say is there a way to include in this process when there is a request for that triggers a mailing to go out to those people to let them know what's going on, in addition to the other things that we're talking about. But we want that layer of transparency, I think, is what's being said. And so, as opposed to, I know a lot of the building owners are, they're not here. They're gone. They're not present in the community, but a lot are. But we need to be able to give them the opportunity to respond.
So I don't know that there's a legal way to write that into the statute. What there is available to you, you guys make the call every year. So when this thing comes up, and if we came back and said, hey, we're looking for a 10% increase, that's up to you guys to vote on. And I know that third leg, isn't necessarily represented, but that's how democracy government functions. They're not represented when you're passing, when you're increasing any sort of property tax. That's up to you guys to work on behalf of your constituents. So you guys could say, hey, we're not going to vote for this unless you guys, unless you send a mailing out and make sure everybody's notified. You can put some guidelines on there and ask us to meet certain criteria before you are willing to pass it when it comes up each year.
Yeah. And I would challenge that to the degree that this is a group of people that they need to be represented a little bit more because the onus is on them. They're bearing the brunt of a third of that. So it's not spread out across the entire community. It's on that small group of people. So I think that's only fair for them to be notified. And and again, I think probably the vast majority, upon showing, hey, this is what Main Street does. This is what we're doing. These are the number of people that we're bringing in. This is the value that we're bringing to the community. These are the things that have happened because of Main Street. I think most would probably, I get it. I see it.
Susan, well, I was just going to say, I think the difference with the analogy of us being elected to make decisions is different because the spirit of the SSA is that three partnership. It's not citizens, elected officials, and business owners. It's a completely different scenario because they're kicking in a piece of the pie that is different than our piece of the pie that is different than Main Street. And all three of those, the SSA is built on the trust that each of them have an individual voice and a part in the decision-making process, which is much different than just elected to represent, because we weren't elected to represent the property owners also with our role is trying to figure out what we might do. Because when we're trying to decide what's best for the community, it may be in contrast to what they're wanting as part of what we're forcing them to pay. And in that, it does go back to the representation piece, because they should have a seat at the table, because we're not the ones that are supposed to have that, because the spirit is three.
Elliot?
Yeah, just hearing this kind of go back and forth, I think two of the nails were really hit on there that would make, at least from my support, a whole lot easier to digest. One is the transparency, just exposing the numbers. I don't know if that's a monetary value or a head count value or a, hours of operation value. I don't know, but it's something there that is quantifying in some way, shape, or form all the value that is getting injected into the city by way of whatever event. Because at the end of the day, we shouldn't have to be guessing what the business value is of Main Street's existence. We shouldn't. The other thing there is in particular, I think we do need some kind of mechanism, and maybe it's our own ordinance that we agree to, for future councils going forward, that if there is a raise in what is to be the levy, that we are listening to them, or at least providing them an ample opportunity and voice to challenge whatever is that raise. Because without that, then I think we are speaking blindly for people that we shouldn't be.
Lucy? Now, in the past, Main Street has provided the type of information that I think we're talking about. They've done some really nice presentations. But it's still hard to directly link what they're doing to rents and property values. So I just think, especially given the small number of transactions that occur downtown. So there is going to be some uncertainty and kind of a leap of faith in here, I guess, is what we've been doing.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I can respect that. I mean, and I don't know that it's...
I'd like to see it connected. I'm not saying I don't want it. I just don't see how we're...
I don't know that it's for us to see that connection, though. If Main Street is exposing what is the attendance of all these events, and then each business owner or business in their area is seeing a spike in their business because of those, then they've made that valuation for themselves.
I don't think it's that. I mean, they're just different types of business. Retail businesses and restaurants are going to have more than the service, but,
I agree.
I just think it's very difficult.
And that's why I struggle with blindly putting it out.
I think when it comes to this SSA, and Scott, I may be way off base on this, but when it comes to this, we have no skin in the game on the SSA in terms of the city council, our budget, whatever. We're actually, when we talk about us being the third prong in this partnership, basically, we're just the mechanism that gets it on the tax bill.
Or the conduit to
Yes,
collect
exactly.
tax.
We're the conduit.
Right.
So we're spending a lot of time talking about it and what we'd like to see, but it really comes down to what do those businesses in the downtown want to see. And so that's kind of as I started to connect the dots here, I thought, why are we spending so much time on something that we really, all we do is help with the billing?
One thing I was thinking about as we talked about the transparency issue is they are required under the ordinance to submit a request for whatever levy it's going to be above $40,000 on August 1st. Perhaps what we could do is amend that also to say that they have to provide some type of notice to the affected property owners. Now, it's a lot of property owners, so there's a lot of mailings, but if they have some kind of a comprehensive email list, maybe that's an easy way to do it, and they just say, as part of their request, we have notified the membership, that we would like to have this X increase, so that, there is that, communication with the membership that, that they are asking for that increase.
Susan?
Yes, Dave?
I appreciate what everybody's saying here and the concern over the downtown businesses, but I think sometimes, we ask for things that aren't really achievable. We're asking for numbers to quantify. We're asking for head counts to quantify, rent, property value to quantify. But yet, when we decide to do a streetscape, we can't quantify. When we decide in our strategic planning to focus highly on the riverfront, improve the riverfront, we can't quantify what that's going to do for us. We all have got a vision of what it's going to do for us, and whether or not some of those items that I just mentioned would come into play with their head counts, their rent values, their property values, we can't quantify that. We don't know. I'm assuming it would. I think the beauty of this whole thing is what we've got here is something that we know works. And we've got the ability, the business owners today have got the ability, if they want to reject this, 51% of them need to sign the petitions. And the city councils of the future have got the ability, if they come to us and say they want more money, the city councils of the future have got the ability to say, we need more information. We want to know why you need more money. We want to know what it is that you're doing differently that you need more money. Ask the questions then if we want to. But we just do an awful lot to make the quality of life better in Batavia and to make just things better that we really can't put a number on to quantify why we're doing it. It works. It's worked in the past and it's still working. What I do know is I just heard last night watching the news, and not that we're Gary, Indiana, but 8,000 vacant homes are being torn down in Gary, Indiana, because Gary, Indiana is a failed city. Well, we're not a failing city, and I don't want to become a failing city. So the things like what Main Street is doing is what's making Batavia a better place.
Helen?
I guess the last thing I would say is, if there really was a problem, if there was something not right with Main Street or the business owners weren't happy, they'd be sitting out there standing in line, waiting to come up here and tell us why it wasn't a good idea to do this or why they wouldn't support it. And I don't hear that, and I certainly don't see that in the feedback that we've gotten. I mean, two of you got one email.
Scott?
I think the last thing is talking to Jamie before you come on, Christopher. I think one of the problems we had. They've been trying to get representation on the council, on their board, from business, from the property owners. They haven't been able to get it. So I mean that's a problem as well. So I think that's if they want a voice at the table, it's there for them. And maybe if they're watching tonight, go downtownbatavia.com.
That's true, and at the same time, though, we're not hearing negative blowback from them either. Right. So I think that was the point that I had in my head was that it takes 51%, but if 40% were here, you guys would be going, whoa, what's going on here? Right. If 10% were here, we'd maybe be concerned. I think that, at the last meeting, there were a couple people that had some questions. I have yet to hear any strong objection, and, I'm not saying there isn't one out there, but, we don't have a whole load of people here, or even anyone here that's really against this. So that to me is a pretty decent indicator.
Anyone else have any questions, Laura?
I just wanted to commend Main Street. In the 15 years since I've lived in Batavia, the number of events that you hold downtown has significantly increased, and it has brought a tremendous volume of people to the downtown. And at least, people are seeing the businesses that are located in our downtown. If we don't give people a reason to come to the downtown, then they don't gain exposure to the professional offices that they may pass as they're walking to and from the event. So there's real value in just drawing people to the downtown and being excited about the events that take place here, and the ones that you plan and hold here are top-notch.
Well, I get absolutely no credit for that, so I'll thank you on behalf of the board and pass that along to them on Friday. But that's, I think that the way, gather my thought on that, one of the things that drew me to coming here was just that. I knew what Batavia Main Street has been doing for the past 2 decades, and that's why this appealed to me. And we have a lot of events, and there's a lot of things happening, and that's great. I think one of the reasons that they brought me on board was to look more at the number side of things. So, Kathy's on her staff, and she does a great job with the event planning and the development, and that's her area. Where they've kind of asked me to look at is towards more of the economic side of it, and bringing businesses in, working more directly with the city on economic development, and focus more on that. So I think I like to think that, when we're sitting back here next year talking about the SSA again, we're all going to be happy with the strides that we've made just by, maybe taking a new look at things.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nick?
No, I would just make a motion that we approve, send the city council ordinance 1855 establishing SSA 62 with a positive recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Saron, second by Thalen Atek. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, wait, Marty had a question sorry.
I just wanted to know if we could get some information. When does the SSA expire?
End of the year?
What's the
this
date?
was the last levy we had, so it's November, and then sometime in November, actually, so.
All right, because I would like to know some information regarding whether or not, before I even made a motion to amend the current one on here, whether or not it's possible that we do add some language in there about when it gets raised above 40,000, that we send a public notice to them, and that they, as an equal partner in this, have the ability to challenge that. And I would want to know that before I made a decision on this. Otherwise, I would just vote no for now.
I think we can put in the language, because we have similar language regarding, the request deadline for the levy. I think we can put something in there if we want them to have notification to the ownership. I don't know, I'm not sure if we can do what you're looking for.
And that's why I want, before I even make an amendment to whether or not it can or can't be done, I just want to know whether, and I want to give you that time. So for now, I would vote no, only because I want that clarified. If it can be done, I would make that motion, and we would see how it either passed or didn't pass.
Right.
But I don't want to make an amendment to something that I don't know we can do.
Right. From the timeline standpoint with the SSA, we also have some strict timelines that we have to follow. So we have the public hearing scheduled for the 20th. So you can continue the public hearing if you wish to do so before you vote finally on the ordinance. That you can do, and that gives us a little extra time. But we would need to kind of follow that schedule at this point because we already have published for the notice and everything else in regards to that. So,
Marty, you don't think knowing that if they were to come back in a year and say we would like it increased, you don't think that just knowing that the city council could say okay, we understand that you want an increase, we hear you, but before we give you an increase, we want to know that you've sent a letter to all the business owners explaining this to them.
Well, that just leaves us the ability to say yay or nay to whether or not we agree with them. And we have the upper hand. It is an unequal footing at that point. It's not a partnership. That's why this is so different than anything else. This is not a representation, it is a partnership. And when it's a partnership, all three sides have to have the equal say. And if they don't at least have that opportunity, and that, all I'm saying is state law may preclude that. If state law precludes that, then that's state law.
Right.
But if it doesn't, then I would like the opportunity for us to consider it, that we do go to the spirit and intent of the intent of what the SSA is, that we can credibly say this is a three-pronged stool where everybody has an equal say.
I think if we're looking to say the property owners have some type of a veto authority over that, I don't think that's going to be legal.
And that's all I'm saying is just find out.
Yeah, I think that's going to be problematic to, and then, there's so many combinations and permutations that would happen with that, is it going to be the 51% have to object to it? Is it, 10 property owners object to it, then we do that? I mean, what's the...
Well, here's a scenario that you could have. Our equal partners right now could say, I want to have a say in any future raises, so I'm going to say no to the 40,000, and this SSA ends right now because they know they're surrendering their place at the table. Mm-hmm. And then it's done.
If 51% of them said that.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. And
they will continue to have that authority.
Only when we're doing the 40,000 right now. Going forward,
they would not.
When we're doing the raises and that, they don't.
The city council would have the ultimate authority on whether or not to say yes or no. I mean,
yes, but they could effectively say, I don't want to surrender my control that next year it's 100,000. I want that now, and I'm going to say 40,000 is done.
Mike?
And I could be way off base on this, but maybe it's not a partnership. Okay? I mean, if the property owners are the only one contributing to this SSA, and we're just a funneling, a conduit, maybe it's not a partnership. But I, with that being said, I'd say let's just keep it simple. I mean, it's pretty simple the way it is spelled out right now without, crawling through the weeds here. As Chris had said, if we had 10 or 12 property owners sitting in the gallery right now saying, this is killing us and we want this to end, it could probably end without 51% of the vote. And we have that right. Every year they come before us. The Main Street comes before us and says, hey, thanks for the $40,000. We're keeping it as this. We can still end it. Hey, we want to bump it up to 50,000. We could end it. We could end it tomorrow. Someone makes a motion. So we have the control all the time. So let's just keep it simple and just call the question.
I guess we have a motion and a second on the floor, so I think we better do a roll call.
Saron?
Aye.
McFadden, absent. Rosato?
Aye.
Atack? Aye. Stark?
Aye.
Chancet, absent. Wolf?
Aye.
Salvati?
Aye.
Brown?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Callahan?
No.
Meitzler?
Aye.
Malay, absent. And Ewer?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, thank you.
Goes to council, right?
Yes, it does.
And there's a public hearing?
There'll be a public hearing at that city council meeting as well.
And we'll make sure that the property owners are invited to attend? Or something?
They have received notice already regarding the public hearing, yes. Okay. That was a requirement of the SSA.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thank you.
Item 9, ordinance 1843, establishing SSA 63 for Prairie Commons. Alderman Stark.
Okay.
Thanks.
So Prairie Commons, this ordinance 1843 and 44, thanks Chris, would establish a backup SSA for the Prairie Commons development with separate SSAs for commercial and residential parcels. And as has always been the case, whenever there is a development like this and there's SSAs to begin with, we always put a backup SSA in place in case for some reason their association falls apart and suddenly we're mowing the lawn and doing things like that. So this is, again, a backup SSA. If there's a process in place that would require a hearing and a 60-day period afterwards to allow for a petition objecting to the establishment of the SSA to be filed by the city. If the petition is filed during the time period with at least 51% of the property owners of record and 51% of the registered users residing in the proposed SSA, then it cannot be formed. So the pros to this approval will create the backup SSA consistent with previous direction to City Council through the approval of the annexation agreement and city policy to establish the backup SSAs with new development. The cons, staff does not identify any cons with this proposal. Budget impact, there have been minor costs that have been incurred with publication and mailing for the proposed special service area. And timeline for action notice has been made for public hearing on August 20th. Approval of these ordinances would begin the necessary petition period. The SSA should be in place prior to the transfer of any property, residential or commercial, to a third party. Does anyone have any questions? Mark?
So just interestingly enough, there's one property owner, and this is forever, because nobody could ever object. So this is kind of, one way or another, it's the good and bad of it, because the good of it is it prevents the property from coming into disrepair, because if it falls apart, then we're collecting taxes from that one owner forever, and then we can maintain the property. So I kind of understand why you don't write something in after just hearing this, to allow them to continually challenge every year.
Elliot, you had a question?
Yeah, just, this is, I remember this one came up a while back ago. This one was already agreed to, though, as far as the developer of the property, right?
Right,
Okay.
yes. This was in the original annexation agreement and property agreements. Mike? Oh, I thought you had a question. Okay, anyone else? Okay, anyone have any questions of staff? Wonderful. Would someone like to make a motion to recommend to Council Ordinance 1843 establishing SSA number 63 for Prairie Common subdivision?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Meitzler, second by Rosato. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Would someone like to make a motion to recommend to Council Ordinance 1844 posing the establishment of a special service area number 64 for the Prairie Common subdivision for the commercial part?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ewer, second by Rosato. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Bless you.
Bless you. That motion carries, and those will both move on to City Council. And we don't need to discuss these, do we?
Well, there will be a public hearing.
Oh, public hearing. Never mind. I knew the answer to that. Thank you.
All right, item 11, Resolution 1896R, authorizing execution of a contract for the 2018 patching and seal coat program with Geneva Construction Company. Alderman Wolf.
Okay, this is our annual patching and seal coating program. Bids were open on Thursday, August 2nd. You can all see what was in the packet, and I'll just turn it over to Gary.
Thank you. Chris Bong put together this program. It's one of the two major programs we run each year. The patching and seal coating in combination with crack fill, which is a separate contract, are major activities that we do for preventative maintenance of our roadways. Chris did a good job of outlining the results of the bid, as well as just a general explanation of the program. We are recommending an award to Geneva Construction. The award would be in the amount of $110,553. That includes a 10% contingency and also includes our recommendation to use an environmentally friendly sealing product for the parking lot. So, anyone has any questions?
What makes that more environmentally friendly?
Well, one is, if I can say that, tongue twister, say it 10 times real quick, coal tar based. The other one is more environmentally, I don't want to say water based because it's not like a water, but it's oil based paint versus a water based paint. We have Alderman Brown and O'Brien might be able to help me too. We have old-fashioned inverted tip spray cans, which that type of paint never left. But nowadays, modern inverted tip spray paint, you got to go out and refresh them. So I mean, it's kind of the old technology versus new and more environmentally friendly.
Does the Seal Master hold up better than the coal tar option?
Longevity-wise, Rahad tells me that they're basically equivalent. It's just that this is again fewer VOCs, better chemicals for the environment. So he has used this product in Naperville, and he's gone back and several years later, he's happy to recommend it.
Well, I think that's a good thing for us.
Yeah.
And even with the more expense, I mean, we have to really start concerning ourselves with the environment.
Yep.
Anybody else have questions? Mark?
So I guess this is one of those things that is something we spend money on for preventative maintenance. So if you don't spend this money, then at what point, is there any research that says if you don't do this, your road's going to fall apart 10% faster, 20% faster, that is then going to cause a greater expense down the road? Just looking for cost-saving measures moving forward.
It's funny, and Peggy and I used to have this conversation several years ago. I told her I was going to get it tattooed on my arm. There's a famous pavement curb that any civil engineer worth his salt will put up on the screen in answer to your question. Will say that if you spend $1 here on the curve, $1 here to patch the road, you're going to end up saving $10 later on because you have now kept that pavement. And I'll bring that curve for you guys. It's a great thing to look at. In essence, as the road, I can describe it, but as the road deteriorates, you do a program like this, you do a program like crack fill, and you move that road back up on the curve. And you can do that for relatively little dollars. Or you can wait for that road to keep deteriorating to the point where the curve becomes very steep, and then in order to move it back up the hill, it takes a lot of dollars. So the goal is to keep moving it back up the hill with little dollars as you go along. So crack fill, as much as people don't like crack fill, I think it's the best stuff out there. It's really cheap, but it really adds great value to the road. Patching is another thing.
I mean, the road itself will deteriorate exponentially if you don't treat it now, like Gary was saying. I mean, every year we have winter, and you have a freeze-thaw cycle that just breaks it apart, and it just gets worse and worse, and it's a bigger patch. So this is a simple patch. It's just pour it in there, you're done.
Yep.
So if I have to look to save money, this is a bad place to save money.
This is a good place to save money.
No, if to cut.
Oh, to cut.
Yes, this is a bad place to cut because it's just going to cost us more later.
This would be, that's the phrase, pound penny wise, pound foolish. That's what this would be.
Thank you.
I mean, I'll point to Houston Street. Houston Street is now 4 years old. I mean, we're back out, I think, the second time now, crack filling that street. I mean, so why are we spending so much money on Houston Street? It's because by crack filling it, you can make it last that much longer.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? If not, would someone like to make a motion, recommend resolution 1896 to council?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Just want to go with the consent agenda on that, Alan?
Yeah.
Okay. Item 12, discussion on the short-term home rentals. Alderman Atek.
Okay, we're bringing this back. This is only for discussion, and we're trying to decide what we want to do with the short-term rentals. And Scott, would you like to discuss what you found?
Sure. We had been directed to talk to the city attorney about some of the issues relating to owner-occupied housing and how do we handle that. And really it comes into two parts. First, it's clear that if the home is occupied by the owners for less than 50% of the year, then that would really fall under the inn or hotel standpoint. They would have to be in a zoning district that would allow for that under our current ordinance, and generally in the residential districts, that's just not allowed. So,
And to clarify, this is short-term.
for short-term. Correct. So any type of short-term. If it's a 30-day lease or longer, that's a lease of a home. So that's different. So that would fall into that category. So, there's a home in Tanglewood, I think, that might fall under that type of situation because the resident, I don't believe, is actually living there at all anymore. So The other is that if the resident is there for more than 50% of the year, it becomes a little bit less clear. Definitions of the bed and breakfast ordinance are not exactly clear about how that works, because we really followed and mirrored the state statute definition. So in theory, if the property owner is living on the property for 6 months and a day per year, they could rent it out without having to be on the premises during the rental period. If we want to tighten that up, we would need to amend the ordinance to say something like, and under the definition of operator, that an operator or their manager or something to that effect would need to be there 24/7 during the rental period. That way we can make sure that somebody is actually on the premises to make sure that, nothing bad is happening on the property. So if that's something that we feel is a problem, then we may want to amend the bed and breakfast ordinance to reflect that type of a circumstance. So that's from the attorney. That was the clarification that we had from them. That seemed to be the only real loophole that was out there. We're looking at this point for direction on whether or not we should be enforcing our existing ordinances and or if we want to amend the current ordinance to address that one loophole issue.
Are there any thoughts? Mark?
Yeah, I guess the thing where they have to be present, I can't support that. It just doesn't make sense that there's plenty of people that they may go on a 2-month trip to Florida and they would like to be able to rent their place out, and that helps pay taxes and improvements to their property, increases the value of their property. There's a bunch of things that offers them, so I can't support that they have to be there.
And if they're renting the whole house, that's a little awkward. I can see if they're renting rooms, but I don't quite understand how that.
Well, the big hue and cry I've gotten about this is from neighbors where it's nobody's renting the house to live in it, they're renting the house to have a party. And they show up with 75 to 150 people. And some neighbors are telling me they're not sure what they've seen. I mean, they've described to me what they thought they've seen. And the police department's wondered the same thing. So we've got a couple of, I would describe them problem children in this town as far as people who are renting their house and then apparently not like going to Florida or anything, they're going to Geneva for the night and letting somebody go in there and party on.
Well, can we regulate that?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. That would be the biggest thing I would suggest is we go after the party problem because that's where we think we do have some problems.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you could write that in to say no parties. I mean, I mean, it's not like it's a college dorm. So we have to figure out a way that you could codify that, but you can't, I mean, if there's 1 or 2 problem childs out of 15 or so that are available right now, I mean, you're punishing 13 people because 1 or 2 people, and there's noise ordinance, call 911, party gets broken up, person's going to have it enough times, then you can enforce I don't know if we can enforce something at that point. No, you are not able to do this because there have been X amount of calls to your house to break up parties and you are no longer allowed to do this. I have no idea how we even enforce that, but penalizing the many because of the few seems like a bad idea.
Yeah, from that standpoint, it ends up being more of a nuisance that's enforced by the police department.
Right.
Because we wouldn't enforce it from a zoning perspective directly, but, if somebody had a party house, they'd call the police, you're violating noise ordinances, you're creating a nuisance, that type of thing, and then if it keeps happening, police would write tickets and take them to court.
Marty?
Yeah, that's what I don't understand, what the distinction is if you don't know that the house is or isn't being rented out, where's the difference between a bunch of kids having parties every weekend while the parents are out of town and one that's being rented out? There should be no distinction how the law is applied equally, because the only difference is one person that owns the house isn't there. But you could have that in any number of forms where you let kids have a party at the house and they get too loud. You have other people say, I want to come over and use your house for a little bit, and they're not there anymore for whatever reason. We already have the laws that are on the books.
Well, I would give you an example, and if Mark reports this in the newspaper, I'll start getting some calls about it, because I think we could have quite a group of folks down here to talk about this if we want to invite this on. parties I'm hearing about, I'll change the names to protect the innocent. Viking Drive suddenly on Saturday night gets 150 cars parked up and down it, and you can't even hardly drive down the street. And so everybody, well, what's going on here? Where's all these cars? Well, they're up here at this house. So the people point to this house, say up the street, and they say, well, gee, I'm going on the computer and look, because the last I knew that was an Airbnb, and they were renting that out. Well, they go on there and they find out that it's being advertised as an Airbnb for parties. And bring your friends over and have a party. We got a super area, etc., pool and all this other stuff. And so that's all well and good, but then there's no nobody's supervising the party. I mean, it's, apparently some people have given their kids the money to go rent this house, and then it's a free will thing. Everybody just comes in and does it, and there's nobody sitting there responsible, and so the police are in here chasing people out, and people are running out the back, and the neighbors are calling. It's a messy situation, and there's some people, I've had my ears bent by some people very upset about what's happened in some very, I would describe them, higher-end neighborhoods in Batavia where this is taking place.
Well, and I think that's where it's, if the cars are being parked so that you can't get up and down the street, does it matter whether or not the house is being rented? Playing devil's advocate, if it's a party and you can't get down the street and the cars aren't parked, then the cars get ticketed. It doesn't go to whether or not the house is an Airbnb. If the music is too loud and there's underage kids and people running, that's citable no matter what. That's just equal application under the law. That shouldn't make a difference, because then you're on a slippery slope with, well, I don't like the people at that house, or I don't like the color of the skin of the people that live at that house and their parties, and then it can be coded in different ways.
Any thoughts, Scott?
Well, we have the ordinances in place right now, and basically what we came to you is to ask whether or not you wish for us to enforce them. So we have a bed and breakfast ordinance. We have a requirement for bed and breakfast in many of our residential districts to be conditional uses. We have, a dozen or so homes that are being rented out for that. We're not collecting any hotel tax revenue from any of those homes, and so we're basically looking to you to see if this is something you wish for us to actively enforce, or is this something that, we need to change the ordinance in some fashion. If we leave it as is, that addresses your issue with, having somebody actually on the premises at all times. So if we leave it as is, that would not require that.
All right, now the hotel tax, though, that's just for homes that aren't in the residential district. Is that right?
No, it's for anything that's being rented actually would fall under that.
I thought I read that if it's rented as a hotel, it's not permitted in the residential district.
Well, hotels themselves are not allowed in residential districts typically. And we would collect hotel taxes. So any room that's rented would be collecting hotel tax on. We should be collecting hotel tax on.
Scott, I think the part that Lucy was talking about, that if it's the 66 months plus 1 day, if it's more than that, that's when it turns into a hotel, which is not allowed.
Well, no, if it is if it's anything more than 30 days, that's a lease, and that's totally separate. Anybody can rent their house out for 30 days, as a lease. If they are not, if they're not living there on the premises, if that's not their primary residence, then that would be considered a hotel for even short-term rentals.
You can't do that.
You can't do that. Correct.
But we'd collect hotel tax if.
Well, that would be an enforcement issue. We would not be allowing them to do that.
All right. So under what scenario do we collect hotel tax?
If it's a hotel in a commercial district, we would collect hotel tax.
Right.
If it's a single-family residence that falls under a bed and breakfast ordinance, then we would collect hotel tax from them as well.
Okay. So the question is, do we enforce this? Do we want to enforce our bed and breakfast ordinance? It seems like if we have one, we should enforce it.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's like, why do we have these ordinances if we don't enforce them? That's a mystery. It's either take it off the books altogether or enforce it. Pick.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the question being asked is the wrong question. If we have an ordinance on the books, then yes, we should enforce it. If we're not going to enforce it, then let's get it out of there.
I think this is going to become more prevalent.
Or change it.
Especially with some of the units that we're going to have in town, around our town, with the housing stock that we have. that may become an income source for people. So I think if we're going to do this, we should do it with what we have, we should enforce it, and I think we should revisit it in 6 months or a year and see, does it work? Does it provide the things we thought it would? Does it help control any of the problems we have? And then also have the police department give us a report on what they've seen. Is it just a house that people happen to party at a lot, or is it one that they rent just for parties?
Now, I know from like an Airbnb standpoint, they actually collect tax, don't they?
They can, yes. They don't right now, but they can if we make a request.
And what about
We
VRBO?
reached out to them, but they haven't gotten back to us on it, so.
Okay. And what about VRBO? Does they have
I think they have some agreements as well. I'd have to double check that, but I know Airbnb for sure does that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what the answer is, but what I'm hearing is we're tasking the two departments that we know are understaffed to do more.
Okay, so you're suggesting that maybe we don't enforce the ordinance?
I didn't say that.
Okay, well.
I mean, from the enforcement standpoint, it's only a handful of properties, really. I mean, I don't think it would be a huge burden for us to enforce it. I mean, it's no different than, we would be sending letters saying, you need to comply with the bed and breakfast ordinance and everything else. There would be some administrative cost to it, but I don't think it would be a huge administrative burden. We do have the authority now to hire the additional person, so that will help relieve some of our burdens that we're having right now, so.
And this is why I think it would be good to revisit in 6 months and find out what does it in reality cost them time and money, and then what kind of benefit are we getting out of that?
And you feel that by doing this, it might put undue pressure on some of them and they won't be able to continue because of the cost. And maybe we also need to look at what the advantages are of having bed and breakfasts in our community, which there are. Do we want to, if we have the ordinance, we probably should enforce it, but maybe we don't want to have them. But I think there are pros and cons.
Right, yeah, and I think that's, when we enforce it, that's going to be up to the individual property owners to say, you know what, I really like this, I really want to do this, so I'm willing to, go through the process and everything else that's necessary and comply. But you will probably get some that are going to say, you know what, it's not worth it, I'm just going to fold up shop. Or, like we did with one property owner, when we first talked about this about a year ago, one person said, well, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and lease it for 30 days. And then they just did it as a regular lease, and then they didn't have to comply with the ordinance then.
Okay. So did you get the feedback you needed?
I think so. I think unless I hear otherwise, I think I'm hearing that we're going to go ahead and proceed with enforcing the ordinance.
And then we're going to come back and revisit it and see how it goes.
Yeah, I think what I would ask is 6 months to a year, perhaps, because by the time we get, the enforcement geared up and everything else, we might not have really good feedback.
Okay.
And we're doing this without the operator term that says you have to.
We're not going to change the ordinance, right? We'll just leave it as is, yeah.
I just want to add, picking up on what Scott said, this really, I think the issue here is only about 1 or 2 or 3 residents or folks that are stepping over the line on us a little bit. Most of these people are extremely good, have no problem. I don't see it as an issue at all, but there's a couple high-profile ones at the moment that are in our face.
Yeah, I guess I'd be interested to know if I had a party at my house every weekend that was bothering my neighbors and I was getting called all the time, what eventually happens to me?
Well, from the police standpoint, I believe, they would continue to write tickets. They may be able to arrest you for a, continual nuisance. We could take you to circuit court to enjoin that. The neighbors also could file their own action as a private nuisance as well. So, there's several legal aspects that would come out of that.
Okay, because that's what I would figure. That's all this is the residents need to take it into their own hands and that type of thing and start calling 911. If it's bothering you and you want it to stop, you take action. And I don't think that, again, because there's no difference whether I'm renting my house or I'm having a party at my house every weekend. If I'm a nuisance, then there's action that can be taken against me.
Invite your neighbors.
Is there a limit to the number of people in our ordinance that you can lease a house to? Isn't there some?
There, in the property maintenance code, there are occupancy limits. That would be a potential problem if, they decide they're going to pack it in with people that are sleeping there. If it's one thing having a party, it's another thing if they're actually sleeping there. that would probably be a violation of the property maintenance code at some point.
So it seems like renting it out for a party is a whole different category then.
It is.
And maybe that's something that we need to address at another time.
Yeah, I mean, the party aspect of things is probably not really a zoning thing, it's more of a police matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Okay, so there's nothing to approve at this point?
No,
You're
there's
just
not.
gonna
I mean, we
enforce-
already have the ordinance, so all we would do is come back 6 months to a year to give you a report as to, what our findings are and how things have happened so far.
Is this something that we think ought to be discussed at the council meeting? So the public is aware of it?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, good idea.
It's up to you. I mean, there's no action to be taken, so it's just a
Right.
discussion matter, so.
Maybe under your report,
Okay.
when the mayor goes around and says, do you have a report?
We're going to be doing this enforcement.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Item 13, Resolution 1897-R, authorizing execution of a contract with the Peak Substation Services LLC of Birmingham, Alabama for substation structure and material package for the Northeast Distribution Substation for an amount not to exceed $107,100. Alderman O'Brien.
Bob Rockdy from the Electric Department is going to give us a little bit of an overview of the next 3 items.
Where do you plug this thing in at? Full in the front. Put on the back.
No, it's right in front.
Sorry.
I guess there's been some questions raised about some of the verbiage in the memos, and so Bob's going to clear it up for us.
I thought that was another cord. Okay.
So Alderman O'Brien, your desire then is to have Bob just discuss all 3 of these next ordinances, and then you'll make a motion into...
That is correct.
Okay.
Good evening. How is everyone? I wanted to give you a little background, and I think we promised this when we did the breakers and the transformer. So we'll give you a little preview of what we've been working on here. Out at the northeast sub on Hubbard, there are 2 of these empty structures. They were spares when we built the station. This is where we're putting the breakers in that you authorized the purchase of a while ago. So we're going to complete the spare locations at the northeast sub. So that's what they look like right now. And then when we're all done, that's what they're going to look like. So this breaker, you authorize the purchase of, and they're on order, and they're on the way. The substation structures and materials package that you're considering this evening is all of this steel structure, all this, all these little things and all this stuff to fill out these 2 empty bays in the northeast sub. These 2 breakers this breaker, the new breaker in the one bus and on the other bus will give us 2 feeds to the new northeast distribution substation, plus provide feeders for the industrial park down the road. We're going to terminate those feeders out by the curb, so they'll be ready to take off and go into the subdivision. This is the substation plan view. So the existing fence is right here now. The building will be outside of the existing fence in the grass area with a new fence and gravel all around it. All of these conduits, all this cement work, foundations, the building, This is all part of the construction package that you'll be seeing here in a little bit. So this is what the layout is going to look like. Down in this part of the substation, there's still a big empty spot, and what we've done is we've left, the original plan for the station was to expand from 2 transformers to 4 or 5. And we've left all that future space, so if we need it. So we're going to do this expansion, and we're not encroaching on any of the expansion for the 138 to 34 stuff. So we'll still leave all that room. This is the existing storage building and the existing control building that's out there now. This is what the transformer section will look like. This is what the other contract you've already approved. This is more of the substation structure and materials. And then the actual installation and the concrete foundations will be in the construction that you're also looking at tonight. And we've changed how we're gonna do things. In a little bit here, you'll see some pictures of Cherry Park. That's where we started. We're changing this where all of those circuit breakers and all that exposed wire and stuff that we have to put animal protection on now to try and keep the animals out. We've moved all that stuff indoors. So that the amount of stuff outside is just this very minimum amount. There's wires coming up that hook to the transformer. There's wires leaving the transformer and they go back into the building. So this is all that'll be outside. This is the Cherry Park substation. This transformer is the same size as the one we've ordered. It has a structure here, but instead of this breaker, we'll just have wires here, and we'll have wires on this side. So this is what this will look like when it's all done. This circuit breaker for the high side of the transformer, the circuit breaker for the low side of the transformer, that's all part of the switchgear package, which is the third contract tonight. So this is the building, this is the plan view of the building. In the third contract, this is the 35 kV switchgear. This is the 15 kV switchgear. That's what's the third contract is for this evening. So from those breakers over here in the yard, the 2 different feeders will come in to these 2 connections. There's a tie one in the middle, and then there's 2 feeds that can. Let me say that again. They come in here, and then they go out, and this is the place that can go on and feed the rest of the industrial park. The other one comes into this bay and then goes out, and then this goes to the transformer. So of these 2 new feeders, one side or the other can feed the transformer. So we've got redundant feed from the 2 different buses. Plus, we have the ability, since this transformer doesn't take up a whole feeder, we have feeders that can go out and feed load in the industrial park. And then the 15 kV side is the low side, which would have the 3 feeders that leave and feed the 15 kV load. This is what the building elevation looks like, and I'll show you a picture in a little bit, but it's got a slightly sloped roof for drainage. It's a standing seam metal roof, and this material will either be a cinder block, split face cinder block, low maintenance, or a precessed panel. And this has got a gable end on it, but this is the type of color and texture we're looking for the walls of the building, and then it'll have the green standing seam metal roof. And it'll be just to this side, but it'll look very similar to this. So our Cherry Park sub has this high side interrupting device that protects the transformer, and all this stuff on the outside, that stuff's going inside. the low side main disconnect for the transformers going indoors. And then at Cherry Park, we have 2 feeders coming from the southeast sub. We have some switching devices here, some switching devices here, a switching device here, which does the same thing that we're going to do at this station. We can bring either one of the 2 feeders in. They can go on and feed main sub and give us the redundancy we want. So this kind of stuff that we have at Cherry Park is also going to be indoors in this building. This is the 15 kV. These are the 3 feeders that go out of Cherry Park to feed the area, the residential area. There'll be 3 feeders that leave the northeast distribution sub. This is also, this breaker, all this stuff, these 3 breakers is actually what ends up being in that 15 kV switchgear. And then here's where we are with the budget. Project engineering, you authorized $385,000. I've left it there. We don't have a final number here yet. Substation transformer was $650,000 in the budget. We purchased one for $487.22. The 34 kV breakers, we had $90,000 in the budget. They came in at $58,722. So these are all good numbers. These are not so good numbers. So the substation and structures and materials, because we moved some of that stuff indoors, it ends up in here instead of, and in here instead of here in this number. So we're putting a lot less metal and bus work outside. So this came in low, had a very good bid. This is the construction services. The building's bigger. There's a little more cement work. The cement prices came in high. We're still working on getting better cement prices. We expect this number to come down some. We're going to continue to work on that. And then we have the switchgear. The indoor switchgear is quite a bit more expensive than the outdoor stuff, but it's going to be more reliable, and we're going to have less equipment for animal protection and insulation. So that explains this difference here. There are 2 remaining contracts. I've lumped them together so that the bidders that are going to bid on these 2 contracts can't see what we've got budgeted, because it's just magic how if they can see what we have budgeted, that's where the bids open up at. So there's a relay panel, and there's acceptance testing, and that's what's left in the remaining contracts. And then the project contingency has been used up here, so I've showed that as 0. So right now, we're running about $276,000 over budget. Schedule-wise, we're still on schedule, if you approve these contracts this evening, to have all of the outside work done by the end of the year, and we'll be inside the building. Our switchgear also has a long lead time, so we'll be getting that in the spring. And the transformer will be delivered around the end of the year, and we can set that. The switchgear will be the last piece coming in the spring, and then this substation will be ready and checked out and online before peak season. And then our plans for the old Paramount site is to have the old Paramount site look very similar to this, probably the same kind of stuff. And that's things we'll start design and engineering on early in 19. We may be able to get that done, the old site, by the end of the year 19, or it may go into 2020 just a little bit. So that's where we're at, and that's what these 3 contracts are for this evening.
Any questions, Scott?
Can you go back to your budget and actual? So on your switchgear, I mean, it just begs the question of how in the world did you budget 182 and then it ended up being over $1 million?
Some of this money was is in the feeder stuff on the outside. Some of it is over, and some of it was budgeted in different places with different types. In the industrial park, with carrying the industries, for reliability reasons, we went to this design. What we originally budgeted 18 months ahead of design was more of a station that looked like this.
Not being indoors.
Not being indoors, being more outdoors.
So given, going back to our patching kind of scenario, given the fact that we're going indoors and maybe that prevents us from dealing with conductive squirrels, how and our numbers are going up dramatically, but how does that play out over the course of time in terms of cost savings for us? Where is our break even on that? I mean, if we're spending, 1,000% more than what we budgeted on that, I would expect there to be down the road a break even point because we're investing in such good equipment.
It's just that one line item too. I mean, the net is 270,000 out of the 3 million.
No, I get it. But it just jumps off the table at you.
That line item includes things which come from other line items.
Sure.
So like the one a couple above it there, we only show the one, Bob, where we have the big, like $189,000 difference.
Yeah.
Savings. That's.
No, I get it.
Yeah, some of the stuff that we originally had in this number went indoors into this number.
Okay.
Into this number. So really, this surplus right here goes right over here.
Is that going to make the equipment last that much longer?
Right.
Or
Yeah, it's-
so that we're
it's
not buying
indoors.
another transformer in 10 years?
Right.
It's the reliability.
We're waiting 20 years to buy it? I mean, I can see the reality of what kind of sense that would make instead of having the equipment outside if it lasts twice as long.
Right.
Yeah, the building's air conditioned. This equipment will be in air conditioned. It'll be like in here.
Okay.
So yes, it's going to last much, much longer. The maintenance is going to be a lot less.
Okay.
We
Yeah,
reduced but I want to itemize all these
Right.
things we did
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, and I get it. I mean, I would like to say, hey, we're going to spend this much more. We're investing in better equipment. We're housing it indoors. We're air conditioning it because it's going to last that much longer for us. We're stewarding our finances. We're going to spend a little more up front, but over the long haul, we're actually stewarding our finances.
It's also keeping the customers that are our biggest cash
Also,
generators.
Right.
These are our largest revenue generating
Right.
customers.
Right.
Reliability.
And this is the substation Paramount that we're replacing that, if you recall, has been on fire twice now. So,
Right.
so yeah, it's
Will that
a
be
station
sprinkled?
that has to get fixed.
And the Paramount is a metal building that's an outdoor building. It's not conditioned.
Right.
So some of the building and some of the construction additional money is in this split face block. And I've used that at a couple substations before. And we need to paint these doors. But this was built in 2006, and that's exactly how it looked. I took this picture the day before yesterday. And we don't have to paint, other than the doors here needing some paint. That's all the maintenance this the building really needs. It's just a lot sturdier and a lot more robust.
So will that wall, again, like using Cherry Park, will that wall stay up around the substation then?
Out here, we're doing just a cyclone fence.
But at
The
Cherry
old
Park-
Paramount site, maybe I'm not
We're
getting
not
the
doing
question.
anything at Cherry Park.
Oh, I thought you were putting an enclosure at Cherry Park as well.
No.
no.
Cherry Park's staying the way
Just an
it is.
example.
Got it.
What we did, though, we went back and we invested $100 and some odd $1,000 in the animal protection. It's not all up here yet. We have more to put up here, but we've ended up putting, basically, this stuff's all bare so that the heat gets away from it. Heat is what kills electric systems. So we have to put this plastic up around it. Double check that we don't overheat it, because that keeps the heat in, but then hopefully keeps the animals from causing trouble.
So if that's going to be, I'm sorry to interrupt him, but if that's going to be what you're going to do now is going to be inside of a building, and heat is a bad thing, you're going to air condition it, but do you have redundancy for the air conditioning?
Yeah, there's 2 air conditioning units on there.
Okay.
Elliot,
Yeah, so, I mean, just getting to Scott's point, I mean, I absolutely appreciate the line items, and I thank you for that, because I remember reading through the documentation, especially when I got to the third one, I had a big question mark as to where in the world we were with the budget then and compared to that. But I mean, the reality is, this transition is already eaten up the 10% contingency. It is now asking for 10% more.
Yeah.
And in the year that we're already having, and we just not a week ago had a big debate about whether or not we felt comfortable adding on to our community development staff, and that was for an amount that was significantly less than what is another $276,000. So I got to find some way, if I'm going to support this, to know that that's investment on future or protection of, like, in some way, shape, or form, because right now I can't support an additional $276,000.
Yeah. Some of that is also in another line item where it's the distribution stuff. And that's why I took this picture, off Google Earth. But these switching devices, that when we put stuff out here, this gets charged to the poles and wires. It's not really in the substation. So there are some poles and wires contracts you haven't even seen yet that won't have these devices in them because we put them in the station.
So correct me if I'm wrong, to Elliot's question too, though, it's coming from a different fund also. It's coming from the enterprise fund.
Enterprise fund.
Yeah.
Not the general fund.
Yeah, I'm repeating, this is for our customers who, frankly, the residential customers don't pay the bills. It's the industrial customers that pay the bill. Right. That's the reality of it.
So go ahead, Mark.
So I guess to clarify that, the funds that pay for this come from the people paying for electricity, pays for this. This is not coming from tax dollars. This is not coming from home rule taxes. Right. This is not a place that I'm going to save money if I need to in sales tax, et cetera.
Remember, half our budget, $100,000, half of it is utility.
Making sure that this is not an area that if I wanted to save money, that I can save money in because it's funded by the electrical utility itself.
This is, I think to clarify things, this is an area where we really have to approve this to some degree because it is our large industrial users.
Yeah.
And we can't tell them tough because what we sell, I mean, the electric utility is having enough trouble and problems, there's enough negativity on it, that what we do sell is reliability and redundancy. And this is what we're selling to these folks.
I respect that, Mike, and I'm not challenging that, but again, to have the justification is what I need, because I don't want to chase something bad with what is still good money.
So, Marty, did you have something?
Nope, I was going to say exactly what you did.
Okay.
Yes, it also pertains to the customers that we don't have yet, but to whom we need to demonstrate that we have a reliable, up-to-date system that they can feel good about coming to our town.
Absolutely.
And the Paramount station is limping. We've disconnected and taken out of there after the last couple problems we had out there, which interrupted our industries. We've taken just about everything out of there that we can take out of there that might cause a problem, and we have no telemetry. We don't have any metering. We basically strip that thing to just get by what we need to get by. And then pretty soon, we're going to have to go in that thing again, open it up and make sure that we don't have in that back compartment anything it's going to give us fits. But as long as we're running that thing, we're taking that thing down and going through it all the time. And some of that stuff we learned on that, because the Paramount station, some of it is built like this. And that's what triggered that design change after budgeting to get us to something that's we can feel better about for our big industrial customers.
Well, I guess for me, it just seems like that one line item, regardless of what was going into it and where it was coming from, was a miss.
Yeah.
In planning. And I have trouble wrapping my head around the fact that if it's indoors, it costs more money for the equipment than it does for exterior grade equipment. Because exterior grade equipment needs more coatings and more protection. So I understand, I guess I have trouble wrapping my head around that, so.
The other thing, the other difference between the indoor and outdoor equipment, yeah, it doesn't have to have the stuff to make it, put up with the sunlight, put up with the rain, put up with the snow, but it does have to be more robust. And we probably missed, some of this equipment is not heavy enough to be in that northeast sub. If you look at these devices, and then you look at the devices that we have, I mean, there's a significant size difference. And part of it is because of just, if these wires, if something goes wrong here, there's a lot more power that's available to tear stuff apart. So the stuff in the building is also a lot more heavy duty.
Okay.
And it has to be in that yard. We missed that. I'll do better on the next one.
No, not casting any
Now-
aspersions, but I will back you up on the fact that in your memo too, that the one switchgear in 1980s, we purchased it, it's at its end of life.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of limping along with that. And as you said, Gary, there were a couple of fires, well, we do need to replace it.
This station, Cherry Park, Main Sub, McKee, can be lighter duty because they're farther away from that source. So that as you move away and go through the wires, the amount of power that's there that you have to deal with in case the wires get wrapped up is a lot less. It drops off pretty quick with distance. So part of the problem is just having it in that station. Now, the other reason that we're moving half of Paramount into that station is because we have one power line that has to be twice the size of all the rest we have to feed Paramount. So what we do when we pull that one transformer out of Paramount and put it back there, then we only have to run that heavy-duty stuff right here, a short distance. And then we can use the lighter-duty stuff farther outside the fence and away from the station.
Anybody else? Any questions or anything? Well, I guess we'll go first to Resolution 18-97R. This would be furnishing the substation structure and material package. That would be the building and...
No, that's
the steel structure?
Yeah, that's this, the difference between that picture and this
And that,
picture, and then the stuff in this diagram.
Okay, so that's furnishing all that material?
Steel.
The structure, the steel?
Steel and bus work.
Okay. And that would be by Peak Substation Services for $102,000. So would anyone care to make a motion? Well, it'll be 107, well, okay, Resolution 18-97-R authorizing Peak Substation Services LLC to furnish substation structures and materials for the Northeast Distribution Substation for an amount not to exceed $107,100, including a 5% contingency amount. Would anyone care to make that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Stark, second by Ewer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Second one would be Resolution 18-98-R, authorizing MP Systems to furnish substation construction services for the Northeast Distribution Substation for an amount not to exceed $1,086,361, including a 5% contingency amount. And this is basically for the construction services.
This is the construction. So this is,
to build that structure.
that includes the building, the foundation for the building, the lights in the building, the electrical stuff in the building, the 2 air conditioners for the building, all these cement foundations, taking the gravel off, or taking the grass off of here, putting gravel in, putting this fence in, connecting it over here to the existing stuff.
Right.
Actually putting all that steel and equipment in this thing and incorporating it in. And
into that structure there.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions, concerns? Anyone care to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Stark, second by Callahan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. And the third one would be Resolution 18-99-R, authorizing Myers Controlled Power LLC to furnish 38 kV and 15 kV metal-clad switchgear for the Northeast Distribution Substation for an amount not to exceed $1,091,231, including a 5% contingency amount. And that would be for the switchgear,
That's for these, this is the 38 kV stuff,
right? And that's the 15 kV.
and these will come in sections. This door is big enough to move the stuff in. It gets mounted on rails, in channel in the floor.
Anybody questions or concerns, comments? Anyone care to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Stark, second by Ewa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
All those on the regular agenda?
We can do that. Spending a lot of money.
A lot of money. Okay, thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Next item, 16, Resolution 18-100-R, resolution for placing a public question on the ballot at the next election in the city of Batavia. Memos from Laura Newman, Alderman Atack. But before we get to that, it's 20 to 10. Would it be safe to say that we're going to want to push off the presentation for the mid-year reports to the next meeting so Chris knows?
Next week, I'll be out of town a week, so if you want to do it to the following Cal meeting, that's fine.
I think that would be beneficial.
That's the 28th?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Chris, for your report. Alderman Atack?
Okay, in response to a petition that was filed on August 6th,
Pull the mic up to you, please.
in response to a petition that was filed on August 6th to place on referendum the question as to whether we should continue to be a home rule unit, given that the referendum question could be somewhat confusing, it was suggested that we also pose a question for a non-binding referendum. And I'm wondering, Laura, do you want to discuss a little bit more about this?
Sure. It is no fault of the petitioner, but rather it is determined by the statute exactly the way in which the question must be worded on the ballot. If the petitioner would like to place on the ballot a question as to whether a home rule unit should cease to be a home rule unit, they must ask the question in, I guess I'd call it, ask the question in the negative. So the question posed in the petition is, should the city of Batavia cease to be a home rule unit? It seems unnecessarily confusing to word the question in that manner, that in order to, should the city cease to be a home rule unit, by answering yes, you're saying yes, it should stop doing something, and a no would mean that we should remain. It seems to be a much more straightforward question to the voters to ask if the city of Batavia should remain a home rule unit. Municipalities would have a more of a latitude in what the form of the question is if they pose this as an advisory referendum. But I think that it would clarify how a voter was intending to vote if they were able to say, yes, we wish to remain a home rule unit. In addition, there's the possibility that voters might make it to the voting booth and be the first time that they're confronted with any information about this question. And so we wanted to include information about what the impacts of the loss of home rule would be. And so Peggy has worked out those numbers to fill in the blank information in the non-binding referendum. And that would be that if we were, shall the city of Batavia remain a home rule unit of government in order to pay for the city's general obligation bonds with home rule revenues and avoid increasing property taxes by $3.3 million, which would be a 48% increase, which is approximately $325 per year for a home valued at $300,000. So that is, we're recommending to place this additional question on the ballot. Both questions, if you pass this resolution, both questions would appear on the ballot.
And what if the referendums conflict at the end? What if?
Only the petitioner's question is binding.
Okay.
So only the answer to the petitioner's question would have a change, an effective change.
But it would help us with a strategy going forward, maybe, for what we might want to do, another referendum in the future?
I just think it is clear if people understand that I voted yes to remain, so then now I know that I should vote no to cease. Or vice versa. I should say, no, I don't want to remain home rule, and yes, I would like to cease being home rule.
Do you know how they'll appear on the ballot, the questions?
My understanding from the village of East Dundee also adopted a similar resolution, and their experience was that even though their resolution was passed after the petition to cease being a home rule unit was received, that their question appeared first on the ballot.
Okay. Alan?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think other cities have done this in the past when this same or similar questions have come up, and I think the advisory referendums come first, and then the binding referendums come second, I think is the election commission or the rules that they have for that. And I think that this is just a simple way to state the fact of what the differences would be, what's actually brought in by home rule tax. I just want to make sure that the wording of it with the bonds that are being paid off with that, because all of that, I don't know if all of the home rule tax money that comes in is used for paying off bonds. Is that correct? As long as we've got that right, then I'm fine with the way it's set up.
Peggy, may I ask you to respond to that question?
Repeat it, because I'm not sure I understood.
The way it's written in the memo, it says that the city of Batavia remain home rule unit of government in order to pay for the city's general obligation bonds with home rule revenue. Now, some of the revenue that we generated from home rule sales tax, I don't think is slated to pay just bonds. Is that inaccurate or accurate? I just want to make sure that we don't get ourselves by wording into a trick bag where I'm sure there's somebody out there that would like to try to play with this question.
We use home rule revenues for paying for some of the bonds.
Okay. Do we use home rule revenues for something else to pay other things?
Yes.
That are not bonds? So I don't know.
For operations.
Does that have to be stated in that question, or is it okay to have it stated the way we have it stated? That's the only
I believe what that is saying, I don't have it in front of me, is that we would be using home rule revenues so that we didn't have to levy the property tax.
Because, I think it should say, general obligation bonds and expenses. I mean, I feel like the way that's worded, it's only saying that that's all we're using the home rule, the different taxes from home rule for.
It's my understanding that Kevin Drendel has seen this, and he actually adjusted the wording.
Legally right, then I think then that I'm okay with that. That was my only question on it.
All right, Mark?
Is this the only thing that should be mentioned in there? Would crime-free housing be something we would mention in there at all? But we can't, there's not, I mean, there are some statistics that show that, but is that something we want to talk about too in there? I don't know.
Anyone else?
I can see what you're saying, though. I could read it that way, too.
Right, and I think that that's a question that Kevin should answer.
Okay.
So that way we make sure that that's right. I don't want to be into this and have a challenge or something else come up on it. I want it to be right. I want to make sure that this is correct.
Would we also like to add in the, to maintain its crime-free housing ordinance?
I would like it to say that. And Laura, regarding this, as well as what Carl mentioned earlier about electioneering, my understanding, based on Kevin Drendel's notes to us, is that as a citizen, we can take a stance and do anything we want. And as long as we aren't sharing our city email address or our city phone numbers, then we are not electioneering, we are discussing as a private citizen. I just wanted to make sure that that was absolutely clear, because that was my understanding based on our legal advice.
Laura, kind of going to that question, since I would like not Alan to address it.
Yeah,
but
Alan can address it, or Kevin Drendel, whoever has the most
To
amount of
address
knowledge.
because we're not actual cities of employees of the city.
Right.
We're residents of the city. Because it's interesting that we talk about the East Dundee as the example on this, and the question being whether or not elected representatives can take part in anything. But it was a state representative that put the withdrawing home rule on the ballot. So thereby, I guess that's being said that a state representative did electioneering by putting it on the agenda. I would also want to clarify, because when it does talk about electioneering, using the public airwaves, the electioneering communications do not say anything about city employees or elected officials. It talks about anybody using the satellite communications to advance a public agenda or a public question and candidates outside of specific rules. So I would want to make sure that we protect everyone's freedom of speech while being mindful of not trying to catch other people in electioneering. I want a legal opinion on that.
I agree with you, Marty.
Because I want everybody to come up to that podium or in the free exchange of ideas to be able to discuss things openly and honestly and have the debate here.
Anything else?
One other thing that I would like to point out is that we do need to take action on the non-binding referendum this evening. So if you could make it contingent upon making those two alterations to verify that the home rule taxes, that we're wording it the proper way there, and then also to add, in order to maintain its crime-free housing program with those two changes, that you would vote in favor of putting this non-binding referendum on the November 6th ballot. Because we do have to file this within 79 days of the election. That's the Sunday prior to your next city council meeting.
Okay.
All right. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment? I can't see us.
Carl's coming up.
Okay.
Carl Dinwiddie, 1156 Pine Street. This is, again, for the record. On Saturday, I requested the city administrator to withdraw this item from the meeting tonight. And the reason was
Oh, I need my other sheet, hold on. When you say the impact that losing home rule would have, you're automatically taking an advocacy position about home rule. It's ipso facto or deductive reasoning. You're picking one side over the other. And I would say also because one municipality got away with a similar advisory recommended referendum doesn't establish a precedent or doesn't establish its legality. So as I say, I would urge the council to vote no on this because by your own website, the city shall not use public resources either to advocate for or against the proposition. And this, in fact, is advocating one way or the other, for or against. It's just deductive reasoning. If you use that wording about the impact, you are now advocating a position. So I would urge the council to vote no on this resolution 100R. And if you can bear with me, just one other comment. It was mentioned that the petition was filed on the last date. Well, there was a lot of work to do to get a stack of petitions like that, whereas all the city has to do is carry them down to the county. So it was mentioned the city has 45 days to file. It's not really an explanation of why the city is dragging their feet in filing. And I've heard comments, we want to see our petition get to the county clerk. That's why we sign the petitions. Thank you.
Laura, one question. Doesn't that logic say that basically then we would not be allowed to put any referendums out to the public? Because you are always putting a question out there. It's not necessarily about sides, but it is putting a question out there to the public. And by state law, we have that authority under home rule or not home rule.
That's correct. I'm not sure how posing a question is taking a position.
I guess I'd like to make the statement in response to what Carl just said is the numbers that are from our financial department to state what would change if home rule was removed is a statement of fact. It's not a support of one position or another position. It's a statement of the reality of the facts. If we lost home rule power, X number of dollars would not be available to the city of Batavia. That's simple. That's how I'd explain it.
All right, would someone like to make a motion to
Hold on.
I'm sorry. Oh.
Hey, Jim Fehrenbach, 436 Wilbonzi Trail, Batavia, Illinois. It's great. We have our 3-month. We had a 3-month spell, and now we're all back again with the latest issue with the town. It's always good to have a dynamic conversation and to discuss and reminisce about things that are going on and how we can do things differently. I have never seen something so large proposed with so little impact assessment thrown out. I mean, it is just bizarre. I mean, everything that this council talked about, just going to their website, crime-free housing, literally half the number of police cars, half, since it was passed. You can pull the data online from publicly available sources. It's not hard to do. And see the dramatic reduction in felony arrests related to properties that have been under this crime-free housing governance. You can map it out any time, any days you want. It's 2018. This information is free. The information is out there. You are no holder or keeper of secrets. You have no enlightened knowledge over your fellow citizens. When you come forward and try to petition half an issue or a quarter of an issue, try to solicit a signature, try to drive an agenda, and not tell the other half, the other 3/4 of the story. We can't sit there and rest on our years and say, I've been at 100 city council meetings every year for the past 20 years.
I know more about home rule law than you because I have all experience behind me. When you are not picking up the data that is right in front of you, and you are trying to sell this to people as a viable solution for a problem you neither will completely acknowledge or will drive down to dollars and cents. It's about quality of life. It's about providing a place to raise our children. It is about being fiscally responsible. It is about maintaining this administration to the next administration. But we got to tell the full story, acknowledge the full story, and putting questions, mere nuggets of information on the referendum so people understand what they're actually signing is a good thing. It is the moral thing to do, and there should be no question whether it should be done or not. Thank you.
Yvonne Dinwiddie, 1156 Pine Street. I have to respond to that. There is a whole bunch of information out there right now, and you can go on the internet and look it up. I don't do Facebook, but we have a whole group of people who are doing Facebook. They put their information out there. I read the contracts. I get a copy of the budget every year. I look at the budget. I know what's going on in this community, and when I tell people what needs to be or what is going on, I don't tell them how to vote or how to think. I give them the information and they decide. I resent people who say, I don't know what I'm talking about. I have read more contracts that I think half the council haven't read some of the contracts. I do my homework, and there is information out there. I don't think we're being fair to the voters because you have the ability to tax without limitation as long as you have home rule. And the only difference between not having a home rule tax and having one is that you have to come to the voters and ask for permission. What that means is you have to curtail some of your spending instead of giving millions of dollars to people like Sherdine and all the corporate welfare. And that's part of the problem. You are not listening to the citizens. You're thinking the citizens are stupid. I remember Jermaine Stallers, who was a councilman in this community for many years, and he was an advocate for the people. He was adamantly against home rule. And before he died, he gave me all of his documentation on home rule, which I have read from cover to cover, along with the changes. So, don't assume that the people don't know and that they're not getting information. There's a whole website out there that it's very contentious right now because there are people who don't understand what's going on. And I think people know, I don't think the question is at all confusing. Cease means to stop. And it's a statutory thing, and when you put a question like that on there, and the reason, obviously, that you have not submitted our petition is because you want yours first on the ballot so that you can push people to vote the way you want them to.
Yvonne, I would like to propose something right now, and I'm sure I'll get all of us to agree on it. Your petitions will go to be filed before ours goes in.
Absolutely.
I will guarantee you that will happen.
I would also like to point out that the period for objections expired about 24 hours ago. Mm-hmm. And otherwise, our election commission would have had to come together and hold a hearing in order to have that, and that's why they have a 45-day process. So what we're talking about is I've been dragging my feet for a day.
Well, it wouldn't even come up if we hadn't gotten an email from the Board of Elections. And, I'm kind of surprised that we get an email from the Board of Elections. That's what brought this all up. I probably wouldn't have said a word if we hadn't gotten the email from the Board of Elections. We don't control the elections. They do. But anyway,
I guess I'd like to make a few statements if I can. You know, in the 9 years that we've had, or 8, 9 years that we've had home rule and all the taxation that we've done, the tax cap for property taxes, it's $100,000 difference. I don't know how that is not restraint and a good use or a non-use of the powers that we have. By using home rule and the taxes that we've initiated with that, we have kept property taxes low. We've saved money by being able to refinance bonds that without home rule, we couldn't do. So we have saved money with home rule. I'm sick of the fear mongering and the supposed knowledge that someone has when they say that we've done all these things wrong with home rule power, and home rule power had zero to do with it. Everything that's happened with the Shodine development and One North Washington did not have to be done with home rule power. It could have been done without it. And the same thing holds true for Prairie State. The biggest mistake that we've made in the last 30 or 40 years with the city had nothing to do with home rule power, but constantly gets brought up with it. When the questions and the information went out from the Batavians for Responsible Government, the picture they chose to use to go with their statements and why they wanted this referendum to be was a picture of One Washington Place, the thing that they hate about this town. And that's it.
Can I just throw my 2 cents in? I agree with what you're saying, Alan. I just want to qualify, and I don't mean to say correct you, but Prairie State, and I wasn't on the council at the time, was not a mistake. People can say what you want, but it was not a mistake. It was a vote by people taking the information that was given to them by people who live and breathe electricity every day. They paid people to come in and say, this is what you should do. You need to get this electricity. And so they bought the electricity. And so it turned out it was the perfect storm. The price of gas dropped, the price of electricity dropped. And the city of Batavia, the cities in Kentucky, anyone who was a part of purchasing Prairie State got burned. Everyone got burned. And it's unfortunate for us, but it was unintentional that the people on the council voted the way they did. They voted, they thought they got the best information possible that they could get by the professionals in the trade, and they went with that. It wasn't because they were just flippant with taxpayer money. So I just wanted to clear that up, because I do grow weary, and I'm quite wearied from everyone, not you, Alan, but saying that, oh, you guys are throwing away our money with Prairie State. Things happen. I mean, it was an honest effort on the council's part. Prior to me being here, I was just a resident at that time, but I fully recognize that that was an honest effort on their part to do what was right. And if we didn't have that perfect storm of the falling gas prices and the economy falling down on us, you know, if we had that right, we'd have been sitting very pretty. The electric prices were rising, and we were going to stay flat as electric prices were going up. And people would have been begging to get our power. But it didn't happen that way. And so I'm weary of people saying that the council that voted on that made a big mistake. So enough of my preaching on it. But I do want to add one other thing, and I don't need to talk this much, but we do need to get information out there to the people. Because the things that have hurt this city the greatest, second bridge, we need a second bridge. And there was a lot of misinformation that went out there regarding the second bridge not to have it. And it was being funded by the federal government and state government, and the city of Batavia would have paid very little for a second bridge. But the information that went out there was half-truths and misinformation, and so it got voted down. Second thing is that the piece of property for the parking deck that was going to be in the downtown. That would have been a wonderful thing for our city. Half-truths and misinformation got out there, and that got voted down at a referendum because there was some outside influence who got involved in our city. And so our city took another beating. And this dam that happened years ago, we should have had that dam taken out years ago. Now the city's going to have to pay for it if we own it. But if we own it, the city's going to have to pay something for it eventually, when we had the state government and the federal government looking to pay to take it out, but misinformation and half-truths, once again, got to the referendum, and we didn't do it. And the city is now paying for it. Millions, tens of millions of dollars the city is on the hook for because of misinformation and half-truths that go out on these, that the people are not getting the full information. So I fully agree, the people need to know all the ins and outs of what they're voting for. And so not saying I apologize, but it infuriates me when I see our city taking hits that we shouldn't be taking.
Marty?
Marty, please speak.
So most of the decisions that everybody is hand-wringing about, I didn't even live here when those decisions were made. But I've come, and I got involved, and I ran for office because some things I felt I wanted to be a part of. And it's more about wanting to be involved in a community than being against things. And those things we're taking the brunt on, and everybody goes, I don't know how you can do it, I don't know how you can do it. And it's like, well, we knew what we were doing when we did this. You get used to it. You know the decisions that you make are always going to be second-guessed if they're wrong. You won't hear anything about it if it was the right decision. I have no qualms with questions going out there for people. If it gets more people involved and educated and informed, that is an immensely great thing. Whether or not at the end of the day, on November 7th, we wake up and we don't have home rule anymore, I still live and breathe in this community. And I go forward. I just make different decisions. Mm-hmm. And it hasn't been the 14 of us currently here. You didn't vote on anything related to 1 North Washington, and I don't think you did either. I don't think you did any of the Larson Becker property, or you did. I don't remember when you actually came on. But it's a constant change. There have been 28 people just in the 6 years that I have been here. And we have had elections and opportunities for people to run. And when we're talking about respecting the will of the people, you also have to respect the will of the people as to who they voted for and who they did not vote for when there was choices. And 2 people that are still here that get constantly harangued at, anyone could have run against you. Have you had an opponent ever?
I did once.
Did you win? Did you win?
I'm still here.
Alan?
Yes, I have. I just, well, for a while, and they backed
Actually,
out.
mine was a write-in that ran against me.
Where is the democracy that people won't step up then and get involved? Where is that same wanting to be involved in all of the minutia? Why does that not translate to more people being here? Why does that not translate to more people running? More people should run. I almost think we ought to pass that this becomes like jury duty. You do a year. Why not?
Be afraid of that, Marty.
So not everyone wants to do it.
Another question, Lucy?
Okay, one more question.
Question is, we are going into our budget season. Do we prepare 2 budgets? One if this referendum passes and one if it fails? How do we know how much money we actually will be able to spend next year? How do we know what staff we may or may not have to cut? How do we know if we can add to staff? I mean, this is just such a horrendous time for this to happen, and it continues to make my blood boil because of the long-term ramifications of what may or may not happen.
It's a great question, and it's a very timely question, because right now we are ready to begin our schedule of preparing our budgets, having our budget internal meetings, and the approach that we are taking is to set our budget normally, without the anticipated removal of our home rule. However, because it will take some time for the negative impacts of, even if home rule, we cease to be a home rule unit, for those revenue losses to impact us. But it's going to mean that we're going to take that budget and we are going to cut it.
So we would have a prepared budget in early November. If this referendum passed, then we would have to revisit the budget and then start making cuts.
Right, because it will likely be too late to make the levy increases. Is that right, Peggy?
No, it will not be too late.
It will not be too late? We'll still have some time.
Okay.
Okay, so we can come back and make some adjustments, but with PTEL, I don't think that there's going to be enough to make up the negative impact that this will have initially. So it will have some effect that needs to come from cuts to the current budget.
Because we'd only be able to go up a couple percent.
Right.
It'd be very small.
Yeah, it's the CPI.
Right. This is particularly confusing to me because at least two of the members of this group who are putting this on the referendum have complimented us in open session and on their website about what a good, balanced, fiscally responsible budget we prepare. And so it's very confusing to me that the same group would challenge the budget. So that's all I have to say about that.
Laura, for budgeting, so that we're clear, it's not going to affect wastewater or the water or electric or any portion of those budgets whatsoever. So any rate increases are not tied to any portion of that, whether we are home rule or whether we are not. So anybody that is concerned about rates for our utilities in their decision-making process, it has nothing to do with it. It only talks to those things in the general funding, of which our largest portion are pensions for police and fire and police and fire operations.
So does that mean, to further ask Marty's question, so right now, the city subsidizes part of leaf and brush pickup. So instead of subsidizing that, if we increased it to the residents would pay, they could easily pay the full boat for it instead of the city subsidizing any part, and we would be able to do that even if we weren't a home rule community.
That's correct.
Right.
I just wanted to address what you said there, Alderman Callahan, about the utilities. They have never been used to subsidize the general fund, but there is nothing that says that they cannot be used to subsidize the general fund. When we've gone through ratings in the past, when we've issued debt, they always ask, do you utilize your utilities for that? And the answer has been no. But going forward, that might be something that we might have to look at as an alternative to cutting services.
And actually, you bring up a different point tied to our sales tax. A couple years ago, we increased that to offset our electric. So we have not had an electric rate increase in 4 years. And we did that because we used home rule to offset the pain of something that is not home rule.
And that is one of the greatest benefits of home rule, is the diversity of ways in which you can raise revenues in order to not have to raise property taxes in order to come up with your need for those revenues.
Because I think that goes to the original question of why we're asking it the way we're asking it, is the expectation should be what we've been trying to do for at least the 5.5 years that I've been, is to make sure that property taxes are not increasing. Now, we understand there are operating costs in other departments that aren't tied to home rule that will still exist. We still need to be able to get drinking water. We still need to be able to turn our lights on. We still need to be able to flush waste, unless there are alternate means that I don't know about or even care to venture a guess on. But those things all go to the larger picture. It's still a large amount of money that comes in. But I would say, show me the exact cuts that need to be made. And the amazing thing is, we ask it every year. We have asked it every single year. Come to us and show us the exact cuts that need to be made. That will have support from the
You still have 20
residents.
fewer employees than you did prior to the economic downturn.
And work is not being done. And the law of physics, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
And Peggy, can you explain, because there's a lot of misinformation about One North Washington and the bond issuance there. That could be done with or without home rule, correct?
That is what our financial advisor has told us.
Okay. And so when people say that this would effectively stop that project, they're wrong. Because the TIF district is the funding mechanism for this. The bonds can be issued even if we are a non-home rule community.
Right.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was clear. When people ask me that question, I want to be able to give them factual answers.
So one of the differences, though, might be the interest that we have to pay. And interest is something that we'll never see any benefit from.
Right. And
so
it's
that
tied to
would
our
be money
credit
that we
rating,
could
which is
put
tied to
in
home rule.
public improvements, or it could be toward the private improvements that are made that are increasing the increment.
And our bond rating would be better with home rule because we have alternate sources to pay them back.
That's correct.
In GO bonds.
That's correct.
And that's part of, the city has the website with all the information about home rule. And one of those is a study by the Northern Illinois University Government Center. And right on the front page is one of the things that they list is how it positively impacts the bond rating for units of government that are home rule.
Gary?
Alderman Callahan was just asking, rhetorically or figuratively, to identify those cuts. And I'll just throw it out there right now. Council has spent a good part of 2018 working on strategic initiatives and identifying goals where the community would like to go. Things like redevelopment of the downtown, riverbank stabilization, riverbank enhancement, second bridge. Those are cuts right there. Just to put it out there.
Thank you. Anything else?
I'd like to make a motion.
All right.
I'd like to make the motion that we recommend a council resolution 18-100-R, a resolution placing a public question on the ballot at the next election in the city of Batavia.
Second.
Let's do a roll call.
With the,
And I would like to have the look at the
Yes.
actual wording of it by Kevin or
Kevin,
legal to make sure
and then
that
also adding maintain the crime-free housing program.
Yes, those would both be parts of my motion.
Okay, and who is the second?
second.
There is
Mike.
There is a non-home rule crime-free housing program. It is not nearly as comprehensive, so that we want to make sure that we word it correctly so that it is the home rule crime-free housing referendum or program, because I looked it up today and the differences are huge.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just a quick question. So as we are passing it, it's just currently as written, but if any changes, would we have to amend the original or the original wording?
I think
just when it goes to council, right?
Passing it
Just at
as
city council.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The motion passes.
Okay, due to the lateness in the hour, do we really need to talk about project status or others?
There is one thing that I'm going to talk about, and it's the fact that on our homepage is one of the main buttons is to sign up for alerts. This past Saturday, that system was put into play when there was a report of an armed individual in the heart of one of our heavily populated neighborhoods. Our records department got that message out to people within 10 minutes that we were deployed into the area. And so for anyone who's listening who said, why didn't I hear about that until, we also had the robocalls coming through from Reverse 911, which was also a great system. But if you are signed up for these alerts, you're going to get a text message right in the palm of your hand that a very serious situation is happening. So just to anybody who's going to either still awake and listening to us tonight or who's going to listen to this in the future, we're going to do a campaign about getting people signed up for those alerts.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Does anybody have another?
I have another.
Mike?
I was driving downtown Friday, I guess it was, Friday or Saturday, whatever. But I was driving downtown, and came up to the crosswalk in front of McDonald's and and Walgreens, and it was dusk, and a lady was in a wheelchair, a motorized wheelchair, and I didn't see her. I mean, it was at dusk. I slammed on my brakes, and she went right in front of me, and I could have hit her. I mean, I was shook. So I don't know what to do, but I couldn't see her. It was dark, and I did not see her, and I was paying attention. And I don't know what we can do, but I'm bringing it up because it was a real close call in my life. And I just think maybe we should try to get some lights or a flashing light or something when people are in the crosswalk, because I did not see that lady. And I think we need to do something. What? I don't know. How we go about it, I don't know, but I'm putting it out there so it doesn't happen to someone else.
Alan? I just want to go back to what Laura talked about on Saturday. I happened to be out of state when that all happened, and of course, Facebook blew up. People got crazy into, what was going on there. I think that's something that we all have to be aware of in situations like that. The basic information that went out on the messages that the city sent out is all that needs to be out there. And people need to be aware that no matter what your contacts are or what happens or what's going on, it needs to come from official sources when there is information to go out. And that really needs to be followed. I've talked to Laura about a situation, and I think that it's going to be good. Hopefully some memo comes out about it and everybody gets to see that within the city, that the public information that goes out needs to come from administration or from the police department or whatever agency is supposed to put it out. And that's all that should be out there. And people have to respect that, and they have to realize that there's a lot of laws that govern what's going on. And we need to follow that and just let it happen the way it needs to happen.
For the safety of everyone.
Well, and it is, unfortunately, it's a situation, and again, we're going to be into September talking about suicide again. We cannot keep ignoring that part of this. I mean, that's over and above what's going on with the media when these situations happen. This is something that we got to keep talking about.
The other, if I may, to stand on top of that. First off, compliments, hats off, absolutely, to the police department.
Absolutely.
They were all over it. It wasn't just Batavia. I mean, there were other assistants there as well, and it was
5 agencies.
Yeah, it was amazing. That's a stone's throw away from where I live. The other thing, though, about the information, please do not go and take pictures and post them all over social media when there's an active investigation and police presence on the scene. Just leave it alone. Get yourself to safety. Stay out of the way. Let them focus, please.
Mayor, did you have something?
Yeah, I just would like to make the observation, obviously, I'm the old timer in the room, and I've been here a long, long time. I will say that in the last 6 to 8 months, I have never seen the city departments been put under as much demand and pressure on an ongoing basis as we are seemingly facing now. And I don't know what the real reason is. We haven't had that much influx of population. But just as an example, we're all talking about what happened Saturday night. That was a pretty monumental deal. Another situation last week, the police department got involved and we stopped a burglary in progress, and we solved a whole bunch of other ones that were out there. The Batavia Fire Department right now is running 10 to 16 calls a day average, and we're running the wheels off the ambulances. I mean, it's just nonstop. The low end of call volume at the fire department is 10 calls a day. Many times it goes 10, 15 to 20 a day. We never, I used to be on that group. We thought we were doing something when we had 1 or 2 a day. Now we're up to 20 a day. I mean, it's significant. Then, at Public Works, Laura and I are on the call-out thing. I get the page on my phone when they get called out. I mean, we're out all the time. North Verdant Road is never quiet. That gate's opening up 24 hours a day because we got dead rabbits in the middle of the street, or coyotes. We got dead coyotes in the street. We got wires falling off of trees. We got somebody's toilets backing up. I mean, it's just non-stop. So I just want to take my hat off and commend our city employees, because we're facing a demand here like we've never ever faced before. And the volume of stuff that we're being asked to do, and some of this stuff, like this situation on Saturday, I can't say enough for the police department, because Chief Ewell and the group we didn't really know what we had there. And to have all these people start showing up there and wanting to take pictures and get close to it and everything else, I mean, that could have been a dangerous situation. And, we handled it the way it had to be handled. But I just cite that as kind of the new dynamic of which we are dealing with as a city government. And it's a tremendous caseload that we are now being faced with here of all this stuff going on, this opioid crisis amongst our young people. I've now, been in situations in this town that I can think of in the last 3 years. I have talked to the parents of 5 different kids or young people who've died of opioid deaths in Batavia. So, I mean, it's just all this craziness that's going on, and it's all coming down on us. But our department heads, all of them, building community development, Jeff and his group are just all the day long, we're getting calls and complaints about stuff that's going on and craziness. I was going to bring some of it up tonight, but I'll wait till another night when everybody's more calmed down. But we just have an unbelievable set of demands on us here, and we really, I think, are fighting a good fight and keeping our heads above water and acting very professional. So I just want to commend all the departments, all the city people, because they really are stepping up at a time when this town really needs them.
Marty?
Yeah, it's context and perspective. It's just as simple as that. The thing you're talking about with the alerts and the emails going out, there was the most amount of people pushing that out too. You can get this in, and it wasn't us. It was regular citizens knowing what's available out there and telling other. So the more that gets out there. But going back to the perspective, I mean, yeah, it was trying for that. 70-some people were killed or shot 40 miles from here. We had something go on that was out of character for our community. But just because there were 2 shark attacks along the East Coast doesn't mean that it is no longer safe to go in the water. The other part about the challenges that you're talking about, I just happened to go, I said it to somebody, it might have been you. Thank God during World War II we didn't have Twitter or Facebook. I have a right to know, which people do have a right to know, but not on your terms. You shouldn't be out there landing on Normandy. Hey, Hitler, we're coming.
When you get you Adolf.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess on that note.
High school.
I move we adjourn. Second. Motion by O'Brien, second by Wolf. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much. That's awesome.
Adjourned.